Have you stood in front of a recovered UFO?
I have had in my possession material that was allegedly recovered from a UFO.
Who gave it to you?
I cannot say.
Former Pentagon and intelligence official Lue Elizondo.
Lue Elizondo.
I was told several years ago that I could never talk about crash retrievals or material, ever.
People are wildly fascinated to hear from someone who was apparently inside the Pentagon looking at the most mysterious thing that exists in our world.
Now, are there people out there in the government that know more? Probably. They're out there, man. There's things that are going on that, yeah, that's not our technology.
It could be like some sort of psyop. Ooh, this could cause ontological shock or an existential crisis if we just dump this on people.
You're talking about a conspiracy on a level you would have to keep a long-running secret, and you'd have to backstop it for years beforehand, like decades.
You allegedly left the Pentagon in 2017. Do you guys ever really leave? Come on. What's up, guys? If you haven't already, please smash that subscribe button and hit that like button on the video. And if you don't have time to watch this episode right now, I'd really appreciate it if you saved it to your watch later playlist on YouTube. Finally, if you'd like to follow me on Instagram or X, those links are in my description below. How's it feel to have the #1 book in the United States of America?
Wow, what a great first question. just throw me into the deep end, right? Just there you go, dude. You know, I don't think about it. Isn't that terrible? I
Not at all.
I don't, because
It must be nice having the feds help get you all the way to the top of the list, huh?
Yeah, if that was only the case. if that were true, I'd probably be a senator. You know, I wrote that book for a very specific reason. I never expected it to even be successful. I wrote it because I wanted people to know the truth about what was going on in the government and how their tax dollars were being spent. And at the end of the day, I wanted it to be a record. You know, people write books for different reasons. And for me, written word, unlike spoken word, is indelible. What do I mean by that? It's forever. And I've said before, this is why the Egyptians wrote the Book of the Dead on papyrus. It's the reason why the Magna Carta was written on parchment. It's the reason why our Declaration of Independence was written down, because written word outsurvives those who wrote it, right? It becomes a permanent record. And then when it goes to the Pentagon for a security review, right? Now I know for the first time I am actually allowed to talk about this. I won't get in trouble because I've said something that's either classified or something like that. And so that was really my motivation to write the book in the first place. Whether it sold 1 copy or 1 million copies, I never paid attention. That wasn't my motivation. And so I purposely tried to avoid looking at statistics, how good something is doing or how bad something is doing. It was no different. You know, I'll share something with you, actually. I don't think I've shared this before. So some time ago, I had a little TV show and we were doing on History Channel with some other folks. And I remember
Just pull that mic in a little bit. I'm sorry. Yeah.
I remember the producer coming to me, and she was really, really excited. She's like, "Oh my gosh, we just got greenlit. You know, it's fantastic." And I said, "Oh, that's great." And she said, "Well, aren't you excited?" I said, "Well, do you know when? Obviously, the show got greenlit, but do you know the very first moment when a show's about to be when a show's going to get canceled?" She said, "No." She got like really almost like concerned, like, "How do you know a show's going to be canceled?" I said, "The very day it's greenlit, because no show lasts forever." So yes, in some cases it's celebrating a marriage, but it's also a wake, because at some point every show comes to an end.
Yes.
And so I don't allow myself to, if you will, revel in the moment, because it's kind of, for me, a little bit of a distraction from what my core mission is. So I know it's probably not a satisfying answer.
No, it's perfectly fine. So. It's interesting talking to someone while they're in the middle of that. Like, this book obviously has been out now over the last month. It's taken off because people are wildly fascinated to hear from someone who was apparently inside the Pentagon looking at the most mysterious thing that exists in our world, allegedly. Right? So we're going to get into all that today. There's first of all, your book's very, very good. And there's a lot of different details you delved into there. And I'd love to get through some of those stories and break them down.
Sure.
But I think one of the things that gets a little lost with you in the years I've seen you on the internet is the fact that long before 2008, 2009, when you got to AATIP and started working on UAP, you had 11, 12 years or something like that before that, where you were in the Army and then specifically within like Army intelligence and doing some pretty badass shit around the world.
I was actually only in uniform for a very short period of time
Right.
before I got recruited into another program. It was right after college, and I did spend some time in uniform. I was a lower enlisted grunt. I actually explain it in my book, the reason why. I could have come in as an Army officer with my medical background and my degrees. I could have been in the Army Medical Corps. But, my father, when I was a kid, used to always tell me, you'd always call me Chino Chino. My father being Cuban. So it's always Chino. In order for a leader to be a good leader, they must first know what it means to follow, right? Know what it's like. And so that stuck with me. And I also wanted to have freedom to do the job I wanted to do. I didn't want to be stuck looking at more Petri dishes or, mending broken arms. So I went into the Army as a lower enlisted guy, purposely. And was there for a short period of time. Military intelligence, did some support to special operations, spent some time in Korea. Very interesting, wonderful time to be there, actually. There was a lot of stuff going on. North Korea was always being provocative, and you had students and riots going on and back in the mid-'90s, and then came back to the United States and did some more investigations, CONUS. And then I went into the civilian side, where initially I spent some time in Latin America, down in
What year?
Panama. 1998 to 99, and then 99 I was in the Caribbean, and then came back for a short stint, CONUS. And then what happened is that 9/11 happened. And my wife had just given birth to our second daughter. She was born very premature. My wife had all sorts of medical complications. She had a thing called preeclampsia and HELP syndrome, HELPP, I believe. And so my daughter was born very premature. After a month or so in the NIC unit, tubes sticking out of her body, and it was awful. We brought her home, and she was at the time the smallest baby ever released from the hospital. I think she came home at either 3 pounds or 2.9 pounds. Look at my hands. I got sausage fingers, and my hands look like they've been through a meat cleaver. And here's this tiny little fragile life that's been plopped into my hand and said, "Okay, here you go. Take care of it." I mean, what? I mean, her vocal cords weren't even developed, so when she cried, you couldn't hear her. My God, what an incredible experience that was. So anyways, 9/11 happened. And a few months after we brought her home, and I wound up going over to Afghanistan.
Kandahar, right?
Kandahar, yeah, that's right. Kandahar. We were the first group of folks over there. Spent some time there, and then long story short, we got involved in the Iraq stuff, spent some time in the Middle East. And then finally my wife came to me and she said, "Look, you got to stop going on these deployments. You got to find another job here. You either got to get promoted or do something, because you're not going to make it back home."
Real quickly, you had said you went into the civilian side. This is before 9/11 or whatever.
Yeah.
For people out there, can you just explain what that means?
Yeah, sure. So the intelligence community has a requirement to have operators that work collection operations, but also have military experience, right? Because a lot of people think the CIA is sitting, some embassy somewhere, and James Bond and having cocktails. And
they don't do that.
Well, some of them do, yeah. Some of the lucky guys. But then you've got, the other folks that are doing ground collection, human operations and counterintelligence operations and investigations, and they're on the ground. A lot of these folks have military backgrounds. For example, I don't know if you're probably way too young to remember this, but in the beginning of Afghanistan, we lost a couple of really good folks. One of them was a gentleman named Michael Spann. Michael Spann was a CIA officer who died in combat over there. Anyways, long story short, there's a requirement to have military people or formerly trained military people, and they kind of transition into these more tactical roles. And so did that for a while, and finally my wife was like, "Look, I don't like you doing this." So from there, I took a promotion, and I came back CONUS, wound up going to D.C., where I actually Washington, D.C., actually just south of D.C. It was at Fort Belvoir. where I was running, rather than doing investigations, I was supervising investigations. So, you get promoted yourself to behind a desk, and you trade in your gun, and you trade it for a pen.
Now you worry about desk pops.
Yeah, exactly. And worried about budgets and, Inspector General investigations and the lawyers, coming down on you. Why are you opening this investigation without blah, 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 blah. And then from there, I went to back up to D.C., worked with several different intelligence agencies, some with DOD, some outside of DOD. And then in 2000 and maybe seven, I'd have to see, 7 or 8, 7. I went from the National Counterintelligence Executive, which is where I was working there at NCIX, and I went to the Director of National Intelligence, the DNI. Actually, it's ODNI, Office of the Director of National Intelligence, and then the director's called the DNI.
Is that under DIA officially?
No, they are the top
Separate.
dog. So great question. If you don't mind, let me digress because
Please.
I think this is important. After the real cause of 9/11, of course, we know it's terrorists doing bad things. But that was a result. That wasn't the cause. The cause was there was intelligence failure within our country.
Oh, yeah.
You had pockets of information that were held at the CIA, pockets of information at the FBI, and pockets of information at the Department of Defense, and we weren't sharing that information. So after 9/11, there was a commission, 9/11 Commission, that realized basically what the failures were. So they created a new position that fell directly under the president, and it was called the Intelligence Reform and Terrorism Prevention Act of 2004, IRTPA 2004, that created a national level Bubba, a guy, a gal, a point of contact that is the director of the national intelligence and says, you will now manage and coordinate all intelligence across the U.S. government. So basically, even the director of the CIA, even the director of DIA, NGA, NRO, everybody, lottie-dottie, you are all responsible to that guy or that gal, whoever that is. And so they created that position. The first one was a gentleman named John Negroponte. John Negroponte was he was a politician, and I guess he became a diplomat for a while, an ambassador, and then became the first DNI. Then you had some guys like McConnell and Blair that filled. Those were the times that I worked at DNI.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. One of the unfortunate things that happens sometimes as we get older is we stop that curiosity of wanting to learn new things. And that can even extend to learning more about ourselves and what makes us tick, which is why therapy can be a great tool. I've talked about it in the past on my show, but there have been a couple times in my life where therapy really helped me reset my mind and get through some difficult situations. A big thing I struggle with is that I'm an overthinker. So having someone across from me during those times to help me organize my thoughts and focus on what actually matters was incredibly important. So if that sounds like the kind of thing that could help you and you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/Julian today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Julian.
And then I was also living, as we had discussed prior, I decided to raise my family on an island in the middle of the Chesapeake Bay because D.C. was just, not a great place to raise two girls, young girls.
I feel you there.
So
beautiful area, by the way, the Chesapeake down there.
It is gorgeous, and so we've always been on the water, maybe because I'm Cuban, right? We love the water. But
I'm surrounded by Cubans.
I know, man. Hey, what can I say? But I grew up near the water a lot, and that was part of my life. And I wanted my girls to kind of share in that experience and not worry about crime and the hustle and bustle and sirens and horns and traffic. And, I wanted them to have a normal life. Ride your bicycle in the neighborhood, not worry about, being run over or something worse.
Oh, yeah. It's so quiet. Like my aunt used to have a place in Tillman Island down there.
Yeah, Tillman. Beautiful. Yeah, so you get
quiet,
it, right?
beautiful.
St. Michael's. I mean, it's come at it. If you got to work in D.C., and don't want to live in D.C., that's where you want to live. And
how far is that, though, from that?
So there you get into my point. Why? Okay. So it's almost as if I gave you a script or something. So that's precisely the issue. Quality of life is fantastic, but the commute out to past Langley, which is where I was at, past there, was a 3-hour one-way commute. One way, 3 hours. So I was, and if there was any traffic
that.
Dude, I'm literally in the car longer than I am at work, and I'm at work 8 to 10 hours. Nope. Right. So zero quality of life. I'd come home, I'd cram some frozen food down my throat, and I go to bed. And then I wake up and wash, rinse, repeat all over again. So my quality of life was terrible. My kids had a great upbringing. My wife had a great life out there, but my life pretty much sucked. And so I had an offer in 2008, late 2008, to come back to the Pentagon for a bit and establish a information sharing relationship between still part of the 9/11 commissions. Hey, we're not sharing enough information. So now that we're getting FBI, CIA, and DOD to share information and whatnot, we're still not getting that information down to those who need it, like the cops on the ground, right? Those folks who don't necessarily have a national security clearance, but they also have a need to know, because if you want to stop and prevent terrorism or anything else, you got to, ultimately that information is useless unless it gets to the right people. So I was brought in to work with DHS to try to figure out a way where we can take national level intelligence information and get it disseminated down in a way that was still effective and useful, but didn't compromise national level secrets, because these guys didn't have, a lot of these guys and gals at the local level didn't have security clearances. So you can't share with them a secret document because they don't have a secret security clearance. So how do you do it? Well, long story short, I'll spare you the details, but you do it through tear lines, and you do it through certain capabilities on automation that can strip out certain sources and methods information and still get most of the information that's needed down to the level. So that's what I was brought there to do. And then it was, as you said correctly, soon after that is when I got exposed to the government's UAP program, UFO program.
Okay, and this is, I believe, Jim Lacatski?
Correct, Dr. Lacatski. Yeah, so this is what I try to explain to people. If you want to know a little bit about Jim, he is the epitome of a rocket scientist, literally a rocket scientist. And in fact, if you were to ask me, in my opinion, probably the world's premier rocket scientist, certainly one of the best in the U.S. government has ever had. This is a guy that can tell you the burn rate of a first-stage solid rocket motor booster. He can tell you the trajectory and reentry speed of a MIRV warhead coming in from low Earth orbit. I mean, this guy is amazing. And so I didn't know it at the time, but when I finally met him, he actually looked like I hate to say typical rocket scientist, but he had the glasses and, the nice tie, a little bit crooked, and the hair. He was more interested in doing the work than he was in his own appearance, right? Because he's a rocket scientist. He's got a real job to do. And I remember him asking me a very blunt question at the end of our first discussion together. And he said to me, what do you think about UFOs? And this just came out of the blue. I mean, I wasn't even. I'm like, what? And so I thought,
let me get my joint out, please.
Yeah, right. I'm like, is this a trick question? Or is this like a psychological eval? And so I answered him truthfully. I said, I don't. And so he kind of looked at me and he said, what do you mean? You do not believe in UFOs? And I said, no, I didn't say that. You asked me, what do I think of UFOs? And I said, I don't think about UFOs because, frankly, I don't have the luxury to. I'm too busy doing other work.
Have you ever thought about it before,
no,
on your own time?
No, I was never into like a science fiction kid. I wasn't into Star Trek or Star Wars or anything like that. I may have seen an episode coming home from school once because someone had on the TV, but I couldn't tell you anything about the storylines or anything like that. I wasn't overly interested in that stuff. I was more of a G.I. Joe kid. And yeah, so long story short, he said to me after that, he said, look, I just want to warn you, don't let your personal or analytic bias get the best of you, because what you might learn may challenge any preconceived notions or narratives that you have on the topic. And I found that very peculiar and realized very soon after that what he was saying was 100% legitimate.
Why was he meeting with you, and where was he meeting with you? Like, what was the pretext here? Because obviously he dumps it on you in the meeting, like, hey, what do you think of UFOs? But that wasn't what was on the schedule
right.
there.
So earlier on, I had several meetings with some people that were part of his program. They had we call them blue badgers is what I had as a member. You're a member of the intelligence community. So that means you have the top secret SCI security clearance. You can get into any building you need to. So these folks had the requisite clearances. And they were telling me that they have this program that's very sensitive. They need some counterintelligence support, which is my background. I initially thought it was because of my background in advanced aerospace technologies. I had spent an earlier part of my career doing technology protection for high-energy lasers, unmanned aerial vehicles, Tomahawk cruise missiles, Apache longbow, avionics, some advanced space-based systems. Only later did I learn that they just needed a really good counterintelligence guy and security guy for this program. They were worried, in essence, in the vernacular, they're worried if the Russians or the Chinese, were trying to penetrate the program. So that's what I initially thought that this was, is just another special access program, another sensitive program in the U.S. government, not really that uncommon. And they just needed some expertise to help them out.
Was this first meeting in a SCIF?
Yeah, in my building. Yeah, in my building. So here's the problem. When I wrote the book, I actually put those details in there. Unfortunately, the government redacted them, so I'm not allowed to say the specific location because we're sensitive buildings. But they were in the NCR, National Capital Region. They were, I can say, very, very close to Washington, D.C. downtown. I can't say anything more than that.
So a rundown townhouse. It's a safe house, really masquerading for the CIA, basically.
Look, you can fill in the blanks as you want. I personally don't.
I'm gonna be filling them in all day, Lou.
I don't look good in an orange jumpsuit, so I'm gonna mind my manners here. And so I went to his location after they came to my location several times. I went to his location. Again, another undisclosed location in the DC area. Looked like a normal building. It was not. Mm-hmm. And visited him, I think it was on the 10th floor. 10th floor, I think.
All right, that narrows it down unless you start Googling.
I know someone's going to be out there right now looking for all buildings that at least have that. It's got to be this one. So I met him at his place, and then the rest, as you say, is history, I guess.
Yeah, and this whole concept of a SCIF, though, this shit is so cool to me. Like, because you talk about it so nonchalantly because you're doing a lot of these meetings in these places, but essentially, these are they're like container ships that are like blocked out from the world so that no type of like counter intel can get in there or something. Like, do we just have SCIFs like sitting in the middle of the hallways in the Pentagon? Like, how does this work?
We do. So think of this room that we're in here as a SCIF, right? It's designed to be sound efficient, meaning that we can have a conversation like this and you're not going to get any outside noise from outside. Well, a SCIF is kind of the same way, but in reverse. We don't want the noise in here being heard out there. So you build a room that has been accredited to be a sensitive compartmented information facility, SCI facility. So you have 3 levels of classified information. You have confidential, you have secret, and then you have top secret. So think of like a rainbow. Well, at that top tier of top secret, there's several categories within that top secret. So you have top secret SCI, SAP, CAPS, and some other things. And so a SCIF, like you're showing up there,
we have it on the screen right here.
And that SCIF there is actually a tactical type SCIF. So that's a mobile SCIF. So they're built in a container, as you see there. They are soundproof. They're also RF proof, radio frequency proof. So you can't eavesdrop into a conversation, and those are portable ones. Now, not all SCIFs are portable, right? That's really something that was built initially for the special operations community during right after 9/11, and you could put them on a boat, put them on a plane, and you could drop it off anywhere in the world, and you could do what you needed to do.
Yeah, look at the soundboards in there too with Obama.
Well, and there's also white noise makers. I don't know if you know what that is.
No.
So a white noise maker, and you could probably pull that up. It creates a baseline level of ambient sound to restrict people from, if they do happen to hear as a glimpse of a conversation, it confuses them. So those are white noise makers, and you'll see those in the SCIFs. And then you have shielding, because bad guys are really good at eavesdropping, and there's all sorts of ways to do it. Another one is to coat. Most SCIFs don't have windows, but those that do have special coating on the glass. Because if you know what you're doing, and I'll be careful what I say here, there's technology out there where you can allow the vibration of glass and translate it into voice and sound and pick up on someone's conversation. So there are these things that people do in the world of espionage to try to collect information. Another very interesting program, which I can talk about now, it's unclassified. Type in the word Tempest and look at what Tempest means from a secure communications, and it will pull up. Type it, Tempest secure communication. There you go. Perfect.
Okay.
And
Tempest,
basically,
can we click that first one, Alessi?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Lou.
So basically, everything electronic gives off emanations, right? Cameras, this microphone, everything, a computer monitor. And so it's possible, if you know the frequency of the oscillations of certain things, and again, I would be careful of certain electronic equipment, I can see what's on your monitor, your computer screen, without ever looking at your computer screen. And so you want to prevent that by having your conversations and having your equipment in these SCIFs, so the bad guys can't collect information. So SCIFs are really, really common. They have to be accredited periodically, but really it's nothing more than a room like this on steroids. I mean, you're kind of like in a SCIF yourself, except for it's the opposite. You're trying to limit noise from the outside coming in, or the SCIF is trying to limit noise from the inside going out.
But you're telling me in like 2007, 2008, this was standard technology we had.
Oh, absolutely. It's older than that, brother. It goes back to the 70s, man. Are you kidding me?
That's what I'm saying. I feel like DARPA's 50 years ahead, man.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So you're doing all these initial meetings where you're getting read in with like the Jim Lacatskis, obviously.
Everything in a SCIF. Everything in a SCIF. Yeah. You go into a building, go through a door that's got a bunch of security codes. Then someone goes and says, okay, let me see your identification. Okay, you're good. Yep, you got the blue badge, which means you have a commensurate amount. And then if you go into certain, like a SAP-F facility, so if you think a SCIF is something, try getting into a SAP-F facility. That's like a vault within a vault within a vault, right? And that is an obscene level of security requirements. And so I worked out of one of those.
They could kill you in there, no one would ever know it.
Or here. Yeah, I mean, it's hermetically sealed. In fact, some of these have I better not say. But
how often does that happen where they whack someone in there?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't be able to tell you, would I?
That's not a denial, to be clear. Let's just get that for the record.
Truth be told, those are for our guys. We use SAP-Fs and we use SCIFs for our own people. You typically, unless you have a security clearance, you're not getting into a SCIF. I mean, there's some exceptions to that if, you're being escorted and whatnot, but for the most part, you don't get into a SAP-F unless you're read on, and you don't get into a SCIF unless you've got at least TSSCI for the most part.
Got it. So I think one of the things that often gets mixed up online when people are looking at the alleged history here of like the program is the whole AAWSAP and AATIP thing. Yeah. It's like eventually it was known as AATIP. We'll get into that whole acronym and whatever soon. But when you're getting read in on this, and then I guess within a few meetings brought in as the counter intel guy, my understanding is that this was when at the time Senator Harry Reid, who was a major senator and at one point the majority and minority leader in the Senate, had basically started this thing called AAWSAP and was saying we need to look into not just our history with UAP, but we need to look into what this is from a national security threat perspective. At the time, was it already funded though? Like was this something that the rest of the other people in the Senate were read into, or was this strictly like some kind of offshoot? Harry Reid's talking with, people in the Pentagon, and they're doing this private team that no one knows about.
So, great question. Let me rewind the tape here a little bit and see if I can help do a level set on this. First of all, it wasn't necessarily just a Harry Reid thing. A lot of people think, it's Harry Reid's pet project. No, it wasn't. Okay, there was two other senators that were involved. You had Senator Ted Stevens from Alaska, who was also a military veteran, and you also had Senator Inoue from Hawaii. So it was bipartisan, both Republican and Democrat.
Love that.
Yep, absolutely, right. And these were senior dudes, and who literally all were veterans, and in some cases literally gave their right arm for their country, right? Stevens himself had his own UFO sighting, his own UAP sighting while he was flying a mission. Then you also had astronaut John Glenn at the time, who was also part of this effort trying to push forward. Now, the impetus to that is still up for debate. I can't tell you in the early days of AAWSAP because I wasn't there. I know there was a lot of people that say a lot of things. What I can tell you personally, because Harry Reid told me before he died, when you'd see him periodically in Vegas and whatnot. Unfortunately, he passed away, as everybody knows. But
R.I.P.
Yep, absolutely, rest in peace. He did some very good stuff for this country. Politics aside, he was a patriot. So long story short, he told me that he had, at one point when he was a Senate Majority Leader, he had been accidentally, and I say accidentally, quote, because that's what he said to me, that he was read on to the UAP program. And then very quickly they came back, I think it was maybe the next couple of days or a week later, and they said, hey, listen, we need you to sign this document. We accidentally read you onto something you shouldn't know about. And he was incensed. He said, "What do you mean? I'm not signing anything. I'm the Senate Majority Leader. I should be read onto every program. That's part of my job as the oversight. I'm part of the gang that is responsible for all intelligence operation." They said, "No, we're reading you off administratively, meaning we're not going to even talk about this with you." And so he indicated to me that he was really, really upset. And this is how he started getting very vocal and about his concern that certain elements in the U.S. government were hiding the truth about UFO, about UAP. And so, again, I can't tell you what he did other than with AAWSAP because I wasn't there for it. I can tell you what he told me, and there's other individuals I can probably tell you earlier on, like James Lacatski or even Jay Stratton will probably tell you more about the AAWSAP, how it started. So AAWSAP was a contract vehicle that looked at UAP, but also looked at other stuff.
Contract vehicle? Yeah,
contract vehicle is a mechanism by which the U.S. government funds projects, right? So you have a contract because most people think, oh, the government does all the work. They don't. They contract out. They subcontract.
Oh.
Yeah. And so
now we're getting into the good stuff.
So this is where Bigelow Aerospace gets involved. He bids on the contract. By the way, people think, oh, it was a sweetheart deal. No, it wasn't. In fact, he was the only one to bid on the contract. He had the expertise and the capabilities to do it, his staff. And, oh, by the way, he funded a lot of this stuff himself out of his own
You're talking
pocket.
about Robert Bigelow.
Correct. Yep. So people give him a lot of crap, not realizing that the guy really is a patriot. He's done some incredible stuff for this country out of his own pocket. So anyways, long story short, the contract gets awarded and they start AAWSAP. And AAWSAP is also looking at other things, like, for example, the Skinwalker Ranch. Again, things that I wasn't really involved in. My focus really was more in initially counterintelligence security. Then it became when AATIP became AATIP itself, and the AAWSAP program kind of faded off.
When was that? 2012, 2013?
So the contract for AAWSAP ended in 2012, I believe. It went from 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, so 5 years. And it petered out. We had requested another $10 million for FY13 and FY14 funds. We did it under what we call fiscal year, right? FY, which is different than calendar year.
You government guys got all these goddamn little terms and shit.
Man. I know, man. It's an entire forest of acronyms, and I know. It's its own language. If you ever want to have a secret language conversation with somebody, just talk in government speak. No one knows what the hell you're talking about.
Right. E4, E5.
That's right.
I have to tell you about this game-changing product I use before a night out with drinks. It's called Z-Biotics Pre-Alcohol. Pre-Alcohol is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in your gut. It's this byproduct, not your dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make Z-Biotics your first drink of the night, drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Look, I won't lie, I was a bit skeptical when I first heard about Z-Biotics, but I recently had my buddy's wedding, and I figured why not? Let's give it a try. So I drank Z-Biotics before a night of great festivities, and to my surprise, I woke up the next morning feeling pretty damn good. I was able to work out, go for a walk, take some calls, clean my apartment. Life was good. So whether it's vacations, weddings, birthdays, reunions, or just a good night out, make the most out of your upcoming plans by stocking up on your pre-alcohol now. You can do that by going to zbiotics.com/Julian to get 15% off your first order by using code Julian, Julian, at checkout. Pre-alcohol is backed with 100% money-back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied with your product, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. So remember to head on over to zbiotics.com/Julian and use code Julian at checkout to get 15% off your first order. Thank you to Z-Biotics for sponsoring this episode, and the link is in the description below.
So anyways, long story short, the AATIP piece was really more focused on nuts and bolts. So we were looking at military encounters, aircraft encounters, Navy ship encounters with UAP, and things that we were picking up not just with gun camera footage and FLIR footage, pod footage, things that we could also corroborate with radar data, hard data, right? And also eyewitnesses like the F-18 fighter pilots that were coming up close, in some cases very up close and personal to these things. So you had several issues going on. And so the AATIP program was initially, some people, depending who you talk to and what day of the week it is, they'll tell you a slight variation of it. I can't tell you really much about AAWSAP because that wasn't my focus. I can tell you about my involvement with AATIP. From my understanding and from my observations, because AATIP became a very legitimate program and is still recognized. How you can talk to Harry Reid and other folks are like, it was real. You know, I don't have to tell you. I know there's
he's put it in memos.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real. That's what P stands for, a program. Now, it may have started off in the early days before I came on board as a nickname or whatever it is, and I don't doubt that. But it was a real program towards certainly from 2010 onwards. And as AAWSAP faded away, AATIP kind of contracted, meaning we limited the number of contractors that were involved. There were really only maybe 5 or 6 contractors we kept on board from
meaning
the
like the Lockheeds and the Northrops and stuff like that.
I mean, contract people. I don't want to say their names right now because I don't have permission to say their names.
You're referring more on an individual
basis. Yeah.
So like a Bigelow, but again, I'm not putting names in your mouth. I'm just saying.
Yeah, something like that, where we had certain people that had a deep amount of expertise that was really what we consider low density in the U.S. government.
But the people who are involved with AAWSAP when you come into it, and AATIP on the inside of the government, it seems like that group is kind of the same.
It is transitioned. That's exactly my point. Well, that's what I was trying to allude to just now without saying people's names. So a lot of the core expertise that were in AAWSAP came over to AATIP and stayed with us, right? But there was also a lot that went, like AAWSAP, I think with Bigelow on the contract, had I think the initial list was like 100 and some people. By the time we were really focusing on the AATIP piece, we had really very few contractors. Most of the folks were government people at the Pentagon or at Strategic Command or within other agencies, and it was not focused on the Skinwalker Ranch stuff. Certainly after 2012, when the contract died, we were focusing only on military incursions into military-controlled airspace, over sensitive military installations, in and around our ships at sea and stuff like that. So, and it's convoluted. So it's totally understandable when people, I mean, first of all, the government's already complicated, let alone, the nuances and the eaches of each. So I totally get it. And I think even some AAWSAP and AATIP guys might even be kind of confused because some of them weren't there for every meeting, right? Some of them weren't necessarily brought into everything we were doing. So
including you technically.
Sure.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So because I try to simplify these things and make it easier from a 30,000 foot view. Essentially, it's not like you're walking into places and there's a giant sign on the door, welcome to the AATIP meeting. Right. Welcome to the AAWSAP meeting. It's like, get in the fucking SCIF and let's talk about this.
Well, look, here's a perfect example. You and your producer, right? You guys work on this project together. You're in a lot of the same interviews together, and yet he might go out and get a cup of coffee, you might go out and get a sandwich, and you now get involved in a different conversation with somebody else on the street, and you come back. But you're not necessarily going to share every little nuance of, hey, I went to get a Frappuccino, and I ran into Bill, and he told me his dog needs to be walked and just got shots at the vet. That's not realistic,
But essentially, to keep it simple, maybe the focus of the exact types of events you're looking for or context of UAP technically like has a shift or whatever between AAWSAP and AATIP. At the end of the day, you guys are a group of government individuals who are read in on serious secret shit that even people above you technically in rank don't know.
That is correct.
And you are evaluating the national security implications of UAP, which is the term you guys, I guess, were coming up with back then.
Correct. And there's reasons for that. People say, well, why didn't you just say UFOs?
Stigma.
Well, that's one, but also the fact is it's not even accurate, right? So when the word UFO started getting used back, I guess, 50s and 60s, what does UFO mean? Unidentified flying object. Well, what's flying? Well, flying is, let's say this is a plane, right? There's 4 fundamental forces. You have thrust, lift, drag, and weight. And when you understand that, you create wings, and wings create lift, and then you fly. That's what flight is. It's lift. These things don't have wings. They don't have rudders. They don't have control surfaces. They don't have ailerons. They don't even have cockpits sometimes. So they're not really flying. They're in the sky, but they're not really flying in a conventional sense. And also, we see them underwater. Oh, and also, we see them in low Earth orbit. So you don't fly underwater, right? So you do other things underwater, but that's not actually technically flying. So there were several reasons. First of all, stigma and taboo with the UFO term, but also it wasn't accurate. And then it became unidentified aerial phenomenon. And then it got changed to what? Unidentified anomalous phenomenon, because we're talking multiple domains. We're talking multiple environments that we are encountering these things in. And so I think part of the effort was just to make the term more accurate. yes, remove the stigma and taboo associated, but at the same time, be more precise in our verbiage.
Yeah. So when you first like agree to be brought in on this, though, you've had a few conversations. Obviously, you can't go home and have pillow talk with your wife about this stuff. This is pure intelligence. So you're walking out of SCIFs and you're living with the information, unable to speak with anyone about it. And like you said in the first meeting, when Lacatski asks you, "Have you thought about UFOs?" and you're like, "No." Well, now suddenly you're thinking about UFOs, UAPs.
Right.
Do you have a moment where, I don't know if it's like you laugh to yourself, like, is this really my life? Like, are we doing this? Or you're like, holy shit, like this stuff's real. And I didn't like, was there this reality moment where you're just sitting outside and looking into the sky going, oh my God, like, what am I getting myself into here?
Yeah. So there's typically two, in my experience, and I can't speak for other people, I've noticed two types of people, how they deal with this information. First of all, when you have a security clearance and you're read onto a lot of programs, it's really hard to be surprised because you learn a lot of things and you kind of start getting, I won't say numb, but used to the idea that you're going to learn a lot of things that most Americans are never going to know about till the day they die. And so it's not really that big of a deal. This is a little different because you've been told for so long that it's BS, right? Now it's like, well, okay, wait a minute. So the two types of people I've noticed, there's this group of people that have this aha revelatory moment. And I've seen it when I've been briefing them, even at the Pentagon. It's like, oh my God, it hits them like a ton of bricks. Like, you mean they're real? Like, this is real? Like, no kidding, this is a joke? And it's this kind of this revelatory moment where it's like an epiphany, right? And then there's the other group of people, which I probably fall under, which is more of a slow and steady, gradual realization that we're dealing with something that's certainly not conventional. It's definitely not our technology, and there's a really high likelihood it's not adversarial technology. And that's been my experience, and that's the way I came to terms with this. It wasn't this, I left a meeting and all of a sudden we're talking about aliens, or talking about UFOs. That wasn't the case to me. It was always, well, could this be adversarial technology? Could this be Russian? Could this be Chinese? Right? Is this some sort of, and as you continue to go down and you start getting more and more details and facts, you start realizing, okay, well, it's definitely not Russian. Could it be Chinese? Well, let's see what the Red Force technologies are, right? Let's see what their capabilities are. Because it's not just technology. They're like, hey, I see this thing flying. Is this Chinese? It's okay. What does it take for this thing to do what it's doing, right? And do they have that technology to do it? It's not just simple as saying, oh yeah, that's clearly Russian or Chinese. Because it's not just the object, it's the signature of the object. And I got to be careful not to go into a lot of detail on that, because sometimes signature information is more important than identifying the object itself, because you can recognize performance characteristics through signature data collection that you can't necessarily get visually or optically. And so
can you explain that a little more?
Yeah, sure. I guess I don't look good in an orange jumpsuit, so let me explain this.
I'm testing your physics here.
Yeah.
I was on the phone with Jaque Sarfati last night. He's like, ask him some physics questions. He thinks he's a physicist.
Oh, I'm not a physicist at all. No. I'm definitely not a physicist. Not even close. So a signature is kind of like a boat in the water, right? We're here in your wonderful studio. You've got the water nearby and you see the boats going by. Signature data is looking at not necessarily the boat, but the type of wake the boat makes in the water, the sound the boat makes, right? The perturbance in the water. And if you look at the back of the wake, does it have two streams or one stream? That can tell you if it has two engines or one engine, right? For example, look at a plane flying up ahead. You can tell the difference between a small jet and a big jet because usually you have more engines on the big jet, right? You can see the contrails, the separate contrails from each engine. Also, there's an acoustic signature, right? Is it a military combat plane that's breaking the sound barrier? Because you would hear that. That's a signature, right? Or is it sounding like just a regular passenger jet at 35,000 feet? So signature data can tell you a lot about things that looking at the object they can tell you velocity and trajectory. They can tell you all sorts of extra details that the physical object itself can't tell you. So signature data is very, very important.
Okay. So
does that make sense? I can try to get another example if you need me to.
No, I think that's pretty good. The thing with you is that if we get stuck on so many rabbit holes, we're going to be here for like 36 straight hours.
You know brother, what I mean? I know.
There's so much here.
Yeah.
But when you're
asking me about intelligence, right? So it's a lifelong journey.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, you don't at the beginning, you don't know the scope of it at all. You
Right.
you just realize, okay, all right, I'm being told that there's some real shit out there that we can't really identify. So yes, that's a meaning of life crisis potentially, but you don't know what the volume is, how many of these alleged sightings are even real, and then you start getting pulled into the actual intelligence. And in your book, the description of the Colares meeting feels like a fucking Team America meetup, because you get pulled into this SCIF with legends of the game. Hal Puthoff, Jaque, Vallee, Eric Davis, I think, was in there.
Well, that was actually a dinner. That was not in a SCIF, believe it or not.
It wasn't in a SCIF?
It was not in a SCIF, negative. No, it was actually...
So you're just sitting in an Olive Garden talking about this.
Well, not an Olive Garden, but no. And it was, the room had been, fairly secured.
Okay.
But we weren't sharing U.S. secrets. It was somebody else, a foreign national, that was sharing their experiences with us. So technically, it's not classified, right? It's just them telling us. Classified information only applies to information that is U.S. government derived. That's classified.
Nice little loop around right here.
Well, like I said, there's ways to have conversations, and then there's right ways to have conversations, and then there's definitely ways not to have conversation.
But it seems like between the cadre of incredible individuals that you had in this room, that you're like, whoa. In between, I think Bigelow was in there too. In between that and what you were hearing from, in this case, Brazilian counterparts about what happened in Colares,
Right.
This was a huge moment for you where you're like, whoa. So would you mind just explaining when this case was and what allegedly happened and what you were told in that meeting?
Yeah, and let me put this out bluntly. I'm not an expert in the Colares investigation. I wasn't there for the investigation. I was there for one of the if you will, the debriefings, so to speak, from this General Ochoa. It's in a nutshell, without going too far down the rabbit hole. Brazil had been experiencing some UAP issues. And in some cases, these UAP or UFO encounters were disruptive to the local population. And so there's an area in Brazil called Colares where these incidents became so prevalent that the Brazilian government became involved. And they sent one of their top generals, to go, I hate to say it, but to go knock heads, right? Because when things get really out of hand, you send in the military. They wanted to get control of the situation, see what's really going on. Is this just BS or whatnot? So they sent in their military, and they sent in doctors and other investigators, and the result of which was, that these guys were actually, some of the Brazilian soldiers were injured by UAP and had experienced the things themselves. And so it wasn't just like sending the military to debrief a bunch of civilians. They were having experiences as well, and some of these individuals were being injured.
Yeah, when you say injuries, what was the scope and what was the evidence they showed you of this?
Sure. Well, it seemed to be primarily the injuries were like some sort of directed energy. Think of like a laser or perhaps a burn where you have a superficial burn. Some folks reported other issues, possibly consistent with directed energy, more internal organ damage. And then some people had some terrifying experiences as reported by them, in some cases, not just being terrified, but potentially even being pursued by these UFOs, by these UAP, which is, by the way, fundamentally different than a lot of the experiences that people may report here in the United States. People here tend to feel they're a little bit more benign. Well, down there, they definitely had the impression these things were not benevolent; they were malevolent. Now, I also want to draw a distinction here. It is certainly possible that some of these injuries were not deliberate, right? They're just a simple process of the technology. So what I always say is, look, when you go to an airport and you jump on a 737, there's no real threat. But if you go on the tarmac, onto the runway, right, and you go behind the jet engine while it's spooling up, you're now going to, there's a threat, right? It's not intentional, but you're going to get burned. You're probably going to lose your hearing and maybe even worse. It's just a product of the technology. It's a part of the propulsion. It doesn't mean to hurt you. It's just you got too close to it when it was spooling up. So that is also part of the calculus that we try to look at. Say, okay, was this? I know you might feel that it was intentional, but was it really intentional? Right? If I go out on the road here and I stand in the middle of the road, I'm probably going to get run over by a car. Right? Is that intentional? Probably not.
Yeah.
But I'm at the wrong place at the wrong time. So those are some of the other considerations as well. And always try to keep an open mind. The folks at AATIP always try to keep a very open mind. We actually approach investigations with the exact opposite approach that people think. They came in and said, oh, you guys were trying to investigate UFOs. No, we actually worked our butts off to find prosaic explanations first.
Prosaic explanation.
Prosaic, meaning a normal explanation, right? So, what you're seeing there is actually the contrail of a cruise missile that was being test fired over Vandenberg at this particular date at this particular time. That's not a UFO. Or what you're looking at is those lights on the horizon are actually on the mast of a sailboat. It's over the horizon, but you can see the mast because it's a little bit higher, and that's a navigational light you're seeing, or an anchor light. Or actually, what you're seeing is so. We went into looking at incidents with prosaic explanation, trying to say, okay, this is more than likely something that is just being misidentified. The problem is, and this is why the 5 observables were so helpful, because once you lay that data over the 5 observables and they start fitting into those categories, now you've got something that is outside the normal parameters of something conventional.
Can you define the 5 observables for people?
Yeah, sure. The first one is, do you want me to go into a little detail of each
Please,
as well?
yes.
Okay, so the first observable is instantaneous acceleration. So what is instantaneous acceleration? Well, acceleration is a change in velocity. So if I'm driving 50 miles an hour and I kick up the gas to 100 miles an hour, I am changing my velocity. How quickly I achieve that speed, there are inertial forces that are experienced. And we call those forces, we equate to them on a scale called a G-force. 1G is the effect of Earth's gravity on us, 9.8 meters per second squared. Because of the mass of the Earth, we all experience gravity relatively equal. And so if in comparison, if I do a high G maneuver in a combat aircraft, that's about up to a 9G, which is a lot, like 9 times the force of gravity. So now your head goes from being 14 pounds to now, almost 100 pounds plus, right? So that's your whole body. So now you weigh over 1,000 pounds when you're pulling these maneuvers. So we wear G suits to negate that effect. And the human being can withstand about 9 G forces for a short period of time before you start having medical consequences and ultimately death, right? You have blackouts and redouts and you die. To compare that to our technology, we have one of our most highly maneuverable manned aircraft. It's an old aircraft, but it's still one of the most highly maneuverable, is the General Dynamics F-16. The F-16 at the unclassified level can pull about 17 Gs before you start having structural failure, meaning wings begin to snap off. And that's the F-16 right there, right? The Falcon. Yep. Highly maneuverable. Now, we have other vehicles that are unmanned that can, perform much more than that, but that's pretty much the limitations of a manned vehicle.
Okay.
What we are seeing are objects that are performing at 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 G forces, right? So well beyond the healthy limitations of anything biological to withstand, and certainly well beyond anything from a material science perspective. So that's observable 1. The second observable is hypersonic velocity. Now, what is hypersonic velocity? It is technically 5 times the speed of sound. So speed of sound, Mach 1, is roughly 760 some miles an hour at sea level. So you're booking, right?
Yeah.
Multiply that by 5, and you're put that in comparison. An average commercial jet flies about 550 miles an hour if you're lucky with with a good tailwind. Now, do we have aircraft that can do that? We do. We have, for example, the Lockheed YF-12A SR-71, aka the Blackbird. It can fly about Mach 5.
Ooh.
You can, but when it wants to do a right-hand turn, it takes roughly half the state of Ohio to do it, right? These things are not flying at 3,200 X miles an hour. Some of these UAP are flying at 10,000, 13,000 miles an hour. And they're doing it in a low Earth atmosphere environment where the friction coefficient is really, really high. And they're not taking a slow, steady turn. They're doing instant 180s, 90-degree turns. So you have to scratch your head and say, well, who has that technology, right? So the third observable, it's a bit of an oxymoron. It's low observability, meaning it's hard to see with a naked eye. You see something, but it doesn't look like anything you've ever seen before. It's hard to explain. Even on radar data, it's coming back. The radar is suggesting there's some sort of jamming potentially going on, or some sort of spoofing going on the radar systems. And then the and by the way, do we have low observability? Yeah, we do. We've got aircraft that are super sleek and they're hard to see. We have stealth bombers, right? Like the B-2 bomber and the Valkyrie that we have to lower the cross section just a little bit so we can sneak in under the radar. These things are different. We're not talking about stealth technology. We're talking about something fundamentally different. And then the fourth observable is something called transmedium travel.
Yes.
Forgive me. So what is transmedium travel? It is the ability to operate in multiple domains. What's a domain? It's an environment. So we are seeing these things operating in lower atmosphere, underwater, in the air. Do we have transmedium technology? We do. Look, we've had them for decades. Look at a seaplane. Perfect example. A seaplane can fly in the air and it can float on the water. But let's face it, a seaplane is neither a really good plane or a really good boat because it's a compromise. And so the more environments you want to compromise and perform in, the more of a sacrifice there is to performance and design. It's the reason why the space shuttle came in and glided down like a brick. It wasn't a very good plane because it was compromised because it spent a lot of its time up in space. So it's hard to make it's the reason why a submarine looks like a submarine and a jet looks like a jet, because they spend most of their time in that one environment. Right? If you want an object to operate in multiple environments, there's more sacrifices to your design and your performance capabilities. That's just the way it is. We're not seeing that with these UAP. They are able, without having to change their performance or their design, they can operate seemingly and seamlessly both in air and underwater and possibly even outer space. So we're talking about something that's really beyond what we currently have in our inventory. And then the last observable, which is a terrible word in the science community, which is anti-gravity.
Yeah.
But it's not anti-gravity in the literal sense. It's simply the ability to defy the effects of Earth's gravity without the associated technologies. So we talked a bit earlier about flight, right, with wings.
Yes.
So there's really only three ways we know how to fly right now and how we can defy Earth's gravity. One is through flight itself. We just talked about that. The other way is through buoyancy. So think of a hot air balloon. Think of a helium balloon where you have a cavity, and inside that cavity it's less dense than outside, and so it will rise till it reaches its equilibrium, right? That's how hot air balloons work and mylar balloons and things like that. And then the other way is simple physics. Force equals mass times acceleration. Put enough energy behind something and it will go. It's called ballistics, right? Think of an ICBM, an intercontinental ballistic missile, where you put enough thrust behind it and you can have it literally counter the effects of Earth's gravity. Same thing as a baseball. Take a baseball, throw it in the air. That is ballistic, if you will. Energy. You're putting energy into something. Newton's law of gravity: for every action, there's an equal opposite reaction, and it goes and it moves for a little while. We're not seeing that. These things don't have any obvious signs of lift. They don't have any obvious signs of propulsion. They don't seem to have a cavity in there for buoyancy, and yet somehow they are able to defy the natural effects of Earth's gravity. So now when you have an object that you've detected on radar, that you have electro-optical data, that the pilots are reporting, and they're fitting into these categories, right? Now you realize, okay, this isn't a drone. This isn't a quadcopter. This isn't a balloon. This isn't, you're dealing with a fundamentally different type of technology. And that's when AATIP really gets involved. That's when it's like, okay, we're dealing with something. I mean, could it be a Red Force technology? It might, but if it is, we're in a lot of trouble, because we've been seeing these things for a very long time over our controlled U.S. airspace, over our sensitive military installations. And so it's obviously, from that perspective, it is a national security issue, for sure, 100%.
Yeah. Now, we got into this tangent. That was a great explanation, by the way. But we got into this talking about it in relation to the Colares incident. So what about that incident, and maybe some more details of exactly what happened would help here, but what about that incident made Hal Puthoff and Jaque Vallee and these guys go, yes, matches all the observables, we think this one's real?
You'd have to ask them. I think it was the evidence and the testimony, if you will, by Ochoa and the military personnel that reported to him. It was very well documented. So, you may consider Colares as almost the Roswell of Brazil. They had a lot of manpower behind this. And, Ochoa was a serious dude. He wasn't, just some guy who flight to fancy. He was a 4-star general.
In Brazil.
In Brazil, yeah. So, you have to look at it from that perspective. They're not amateurs by any stretch. So I think that probably is one of the reasons why that. But that's just one example. That's just an incident. That's it's at the end of the day, it was very interesting to me. I don't know how valuable it was. It didn't change anything for me. It didn't change my view or my being. I've always told people my background. I went to college to study science. I studied microbiology, immunology, and parasitology. Not parapsychology, parasitology, the study of parasites, microorganisms. And then later in my career, I was an investigator, special agent. So, I was always considered myself just the facts man kind of guy. I'm not really interested in innuendos and supposition. I just give me the data and we'll let the data speak for
itself. You picked the
itself.
wrong field for that.
Yeah, boy, ain't that the truth, brother? Man, you ain't kidding. Yeah, don't I know? So again, we tried to approach the UAP topic the same as we did anything else, right? Whether you're hunting terrorists or spies or you're hunting UFOs, there's an applied methodology when you're looking at these things. It's not just grandma saw some lights in the backyard. I mean, we're well beyond that. We're using really sophisticated capabilities. You've got some of the best trained individuals, like on the Spy 1 radar. People don't realize this, but the radar operator on the USS Princeton was also Top Gun trained. People think, oh, only fighter pilots go to Top Gun. No, they don't. The radar operators can also go to Top Gun, and they are there to support these guys who are flying combat missions, these guys and gals. And so I remember Kevin Day actually explaining one time that it was for days it was raining UFOs at the Spy 1 radar. So what is a Spy 1 radar? So let's say this is a radar. So radar were really invented towards the end of World War II. They were used to try to identify enemy aircraft that were coming in over the horizon. Before you could hear them, before you see them, you want to know that they're coming so you don't get surprised. But radar data back then, and radars were very primitive. They basically sent out a signal, and that signal bounced off an object and returned back to the radar array. The radars we have now, the multi-arrayed radars, are kind of like a super type of radar, where you have, rather than just one radar, you've got multiple radars, all in slightly different frequencies, so you can get really good pinpoint fidelity on what you're trying to track, okay? And also, you can also send these signals way far. You can adjust. You got to be a little careful with this, but it's a lot smarter technology. So you get a lot more fidelity. And in this case, the Spy 1 radar, as you see up here on the Princeton, this could pick up a baseball at 80,000 feet. Now think about that. Whoa, 80,000 feet, right? That's look, if
you ain't breathing up there.
No, you're talking about probably 17 miles away.
Yeah.
And you're tracking with an electronic piece of equipment a baseball. I mean, that's and it could probably even do more than that, but that's what they claim. And then you have airborne radar, right? You have, like, for example, the E2 Hawkeye, which is a radar platform, flying radar platform. If you pull a picture up of an E2 Hawkeye, I can explain that for you a little bit too, because it's important, because these are the radar systems that were being used and are used even today to prosecute combat missions. So this is an E2 Hawkeye, and you can see that big dish on the top, and that's a radar. It's a radar. That's all it is a flying radar. And you can dial in and tune into, with a great deal of fidelity, objects, and it gives you this air control and supremacy in the sky when you're flying combat missions. So you've got sea-based radar and airborne radar and some land-based radar, all detecting the same thing, while at the same time you have gun camera footage, while at the same time maybe FLIR pod footage, while at the same time you have pilots that are also actually seeing this thing. So let's count these up for a second, right? So you've got maybe 5 or 6 sources of information, different collection capabilities, all reporting the same event at the same time, at the same place, under the same circumstance, right? So if this was a court of law, I've told people, look, we're beyond reasonable doubt. I mean, this is the same equipment we use to, put warheads on foreheads, and it works. So, you're questioning it now when we've been using it for decades, and it works. So this is why I think, if AATIP contributed anything, it contributed a level of rigor behind the UAP topic from a national security issue. And I want to be clear, because a lot of people say, fear mongering, it's a national security threat. I never said it was a threat. I said it's an issue. because we don't know if it's a threat. In government parlance, it's a very simple calculus to determine if something is a threat. There's only two pieces. It's capabilities versus intent. Now, we've seen some of the capabilities. We have no idea the intent. Yeah. So it's impossible to say it's a threat. And so one of the examples I use a lot of times, and I don't mean it to scare people, but this is kind of how I see the issue from a national security issue. You live in a beautiful area here. I won't say where, but
people know it's Hoboken. It's cool.
Do you lock your front door at night before you go to bed?
Fuck yeah.
Yeah, me too. And probably most Americans, even though you don't expect anything bad to happen, probably a good idea to lock your door before you go to bed.
Yep.
And some folks may even go the step further, and they might just check their windows to make sure they're locked, especially if they live on a lower floor, and they might even turn their alarm system on before they go to bed. Let's say one Sunday morning you walk downstairs to have a nice hot cup of coffee or tea, and as you walk downstairs, you see size 11 muddy boot prints in your living room carpet that were not there the night before. Now, no one's been hurt. Nothing's out of place. Nothing's been stolen. But despite you locking the door that night before and checking the windows and turning on your alarm system, there are now boot prints in your living room carpet that were not there the night before. My question to you is that a threat? And so my response is, it could be if it wanted to be, so we should probably figure out how the hell they're getting into the house. Yeah. It's the same thing with this. We have these technologies that are being deployed over our controlled U.S. airspace, over our most sensitive military installations, and quite possibly to potentially interfere with our nuclear equities. Is that a problem? Well, if these things had a Russian star on the tail or a North Korean tail number, you're damn right. You'd be on the front page of every newspaper, right?
You were saying people inside the Pentagon, though, were kind of like when you literally couldn't say it had a sticker of another country on there. They're like, what are we worried about anyway?
Right.
So it's almost like they needed the branding to care that,
brother,
you're
that
in
just
McDonald's.
happened in 2022 on ABC. Secretary of the Air Force Kendall said, "Yeah, we know they're there, but that's not really a priority right now. We don't know where they're from. That's not a priority."
Does that drive you nuts?
Well, let me ask you this: if a submarine were to pop out of the Potomac and it becomes some sort of ballistic submarine that doesn't have a flag on it, would that be a concern to you?
Yeah,
absolutely. Right? I mean, what do you mean? It's not a concern because we don't know that's insane. That's the antithesis. That's the opposite of national security. Yes, that is most important because until you know whose that is, it can be a problem. Yeah. And so, it drives me crazy because, people say, well, we have other priorities. What other priority do you have than that? There's a technology that can come in unimpeded anytime, anywhere, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. But because you can't explain it, you don't want to have the conversation. I hate to tell you this, but that's a problem.
Yeah. Now, you talk about there being three possibilities, though, with these things, that they're malevolent, benevolent, or they're neutral. Right. I think one thing that's an interesting point to get into with this is the nuclear history, because you just brought it up yourself. So let's go there. When I look at the different sightings that have largely happened, not just in America, but in other places around the world, where these UAP are identified at often military bases where there are nuclear weapons, or on tankers like the USS Roosevelt or something like that, where there are nuclear weapons present.
Carrier.
I'm sorry. So when I see that,
I only say that because my Navy buddies would be telling me, "Why did you correct them?"
Yeah, listen, I'm from Jersey. Don't take it personally. But when I see these patterns, and I see that despite us having this technology since the Manhattan Project in the 1940s, the fact that since Hiroshima and Nagasaki, no nuclear bombs have been detonated in a war footing type scenario, meaning they've been detonated in tests around the world and stuff, so they've been allowed to happen. When I see that and I hear stories like these things are fucking with our nuclear reactors and telling us like, no, like the old Bob Salas story, it's like they're taking matches out of the hands of a baby. It almost seems like they're watching us like a god a little bit, if this is the case, to make sure we don't destroy ourselves.
So I interviewed a number of eyewitnesses regarding that aspect of the phenomenon, and that is particularly during the Cold War, the height of the Cold War. They are witnessed in Russia and all scattered across the United States. And this launch control officer, Robert Salas, I'll never forget this. He said, "Well, James, the message I got when they shut our nukes off, it's almost like they were taking matches out of the hands of a baby."
I tend to think that it's almost like whoever they are, we can get into this later, be they future humans, be they aliens, be they some fucking civilization or something, it's like they're telling you, no, don't do that. You guys have gotten too much power. That said, your argument is more that, this looks a little more malevolent to me because they're showing us they can take our capabilities, and they're fucking with whether or not these things are actually going to go into, whatever the pre-launch codes are, and who's to say like they wouldn't go off or something like that. My point is, why would it not have happened then? Why would it be the pattern that literally none of them have gone off since 1946?
Well, we made that decision. We made that. Nope, no one did that but us. We decided as a world we're not going to drop them on each other, at least not yet. But let's look at this temporally speaking. So in 1945, we vaporized almost 800,000 souls off this planet, dropping 2 bombs, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Okay, UAP did not stop that. They were not there when we were going from the atomic age to the nuclear age, okay? Which is, by the way, goes from kiloton yield to megaton yield, right? Yeah. Now we have the power to literally erase entire cities off the map, vaporize completely. There were nowhere to be found or stop us from testing these things in the Nevada desert. There were nowhere to be found to stop the proliferation now of nuclear weapons getting into the hands of countries like, North Korea, right? And all these other countries. So it went from one country, us, to now everybody's got nukes. Okay.
Kim Jong's a great guy. I trust him.
Yeah, that wonderful boyish face. And then you look at things like 3 Mile Island. You look at Chernobyl. You look at Fukushima. They didn't stop those, right? So there isn't any information to suggest that it's necessarily here to help. And they haven't stopped, world hunger and pandemics and things like that. So there really isn't a whole lot of information to substantiate that. It feels good. They're here to take matches out of the hands of children, and they always say, look what happened up in with the flight. I think it was November flight, might be Oscar flight, of our nukes, where an entire flight of missiles were brought down offline, allegedly by a UFO. People are like, see, they're turning them off. Yeah, but in Russia they turn them on. Right, because they have an opposite where we have to put our fingers on the proverbial buttons. They have like a dead man switch. Their fingers are always on the button, and when it comes off, that's when they go. Proverbially speaking. So Russians are very clever.
Yeah,
assured mutual destruction. That's and right. So and over there, there's reports of them turning them on. So there is nothing to suggest that they're necessarily helping us. Now, let me put on 2 different hats here. Okay, one is a national security hat. And by the way, it's different than the way I feel. I can have 2 different perspectives, and
unbelievable.
Absolutely,
I didn't know that was possible.
Absolutely,
these days, Lou.
Yeah, sure. So there is my national security hat, right? Okay, what do I see? I do see these things very interested in our military equities. I see their ability to interfere with our nuclear capabilities, and I see them particularly over our sensitive military installations. What does that look like to me? That looks like preparation of the battle space. It looks like ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. It looks like an active campaign to understand our capabilities. Now, that's my national security hat, right? So if you're paying me as a 3-star general to think on behalf of the American people, if there's even a 5% chance that things could do something bad to us, then my job is to make sure that gets down to 0%. Now, let me take that hat off for a second and put on my Luis Elizondo hat. Okay. Do I see any evidence that they're here to harm us as a species or whatever it is? No, I don't. But let me now put on my special agent hat on, right?
Third hat.
Yeah, third hat. Now I've got a whole bunch of them on the shelf, okay. Right? So you come to me and you say, Lou, listen, I've got this problem. I went to sleep last night and I had this crazy experience. I woke up and I was being taken somewhere I didn't want to go, but I was being taken there. Okay, well, that's kidnapping. Federal charge. You've been taken away from against your will. Yeah, when I was there, Lou, they were touching me. They were doing these things to me, and it scared me. Okay, well that's assault. Okay, another felony offense. Keep going, right? So that's not a nice thing. And I've got daughters. If my daughter got into an Uber and she wanted to go to the mall and instead they took her somewhere else, that's kidnapping.
Yes.
Right? That's not a nice thing.
You're talking about experiencers who say they were abducted right now.
Who claim that they've been abducted, right? Abduction. Think of the word abduction.
Yeah.
That's a crime. That's a felony, baby.
Did you ever come across cases that you felt had a great burden of proof evidence to prove that had actually happened? Because you know how a lot of people are skeptical of this.
Sure.
And to be fair, you and I were having a great conversation before the cameras were rolling about how, unfortunately, in this space, so many people are like, I just want to fucking believe.
Right.
And they believe everything, every single case, no matter what. And
Right.
it actually sets the stigma back further.
It absolutely does. And this is where we get into the conversation of true believers and true skeptics, right? They're really one and the same. I know they seem opposite sides of the spectrum, but the mentality is the same. And this is not an attack on anybody. So let me just preface that. But a true believer, no matter what information you provide them, they will always, always believe that everything they hear is correct. And then you have the professional skeptic that no matter what evidence is provided, they will never accept the fact that their narrative could be wrong. So those two folks, those two sides of the equation are really never my focus. People will always say, well, Lou, are you trying to tell us they're real? I'm not trying to tell you anything. My job is to provide the data and the facts and allow you guys to decide what it means to you. And this is why I've always said to people, don't shoot the messenger and don't ask me what I think, because it doesn't matter what I think. What matters is what you think. There's so many people in the UFO community that want to tell you what they think because they have the answer, they have the solution. They're the only ones. They have a monopoly on thought. And unless you agree with them, then you're crazy, right? And that's across the board. I think the approach we need to take is, look, let's put all narratives aside, whether they're from outer space, inner space, or the space in between. Here are the facts. Here are the facts of what we are dealing with. We are dealing with a technology that is real. We are dealing with a technology that is interested in our equities. We are dealing with a technology that can outperform anything we have. That we do know. What do we not know? We don't know where they're from. We don't know what they want. We don't know what the intent. We don't know a whole bunch of other stuff. We don't know motivation. Maybe there is no motivation, right? We're looking at things through anthropomorphic eyes. You and me are human beings, so we judge everything based upon it. That's why we give
That's
our
right.
dogs people names, because we are, whether we realize it or not, we are imposing our own understanding of what it means to be a human onto everything else and presume everything else is like us. But that's not necessarily the case, especially when you're dealing with things like, let's say, artificial intelligence, where it's binary. There is no motivation intent. It just is, right? And so we have to really limit ourselves from going down that temptation of assuming everything is like us, everything has motivation, everything has the same type of desires that we have. And we do that all the time. We do it subconsciously. And let me, if I can, digress here for a second. Hubris is really ultimately responsible for this, because we are a species where we have pride and ego and we have a narrative in our head. And rather than in the face of new data and facts, reframe our own narrative, we reject that data and hold on to our own narrative because
Yes.
it's this is what I believe, and therefore any new information must be wrong, right? And let me give you some examples. I went to, like I said, University of Miami, and I've always considered myself a disciple of science. I believe in the scientific method, scientific principles, right? I believe in physics. I believe in mathematics. It works. And when I was in college, I learned that it was the Greeks. So if you look at the modern human, Homo sapiens sapien, most anthropologists agree that modern humans have been around for the last 100,000 to 200,000 years, okay, as a modern human being. And if you look at that, it wasn't until the last 2,000 years that we realized there's only two dominant life forms on this planet. You are either a plant or you are an animal. It was the Greeks who recognized that, and humans being an animal. If you look at a 24-hour clock, right? So 200,000 years ago and then 2,000 years ago, it's really just the last maybe 10 minutes. We realize that. And that wasn't until the Renaissance, 300 years ago, during the days of enlightenment, that we recognized and discovered an entirely other form of life on this planet that we've been sharing all along. That is neither plant nor animal, and that is the world of fungus. And so we tap ourselves on the shoulder and say, wow, what a great, great discovery. And it wasn't until the last maybe 5 seconds of our existence as modern man on this planet, last 120 years, think about it, that we had the technology to actually discover the true dominant or alpha life form on this planet. And in fact, if you take all the biomass of every plant and all the biomass of every animal and all the biomass of every fungus and add it all up together, it still does not add up to this hidden life form that has been on this planet longer than any of us. And that is the world of microorganisms. It's the things that are inside you that make you up, that live on the skin of the ISS space station and can thrive miles beneath the crushing depth of the Arctic ice. It's everywhere. And it wasn't until we could have the technology to curve glass and look through a little metal tube and famously shout the words, little beasties, did we discover for the first time the true dominant alpha life form on this planet that's been here all along. And so
until we discover the next one,
so
that's been here all along.
100%, you're tracking, right? Until we discover the next one. And that's why people say, oh, this is the greatest discovery in UAP that mankind. No, it's not. It's just another one. We're always, if there's one thing mankind is right about, is that fact that we're usually wrong a lot of times. When I grew up in science, I was told, and this is recent, all life forms are based on, ultimately, the building blocks of photosynthesis. All life form. Well, that's not true. In fact, if you go to the deepest parts of the ocean, where there are these things called black smokers, these vents, heated vents, superheated vents underwater, volcanic vents, life is abundant down there, and it thrives off of a process called chemosynthesis. There is no light down there, and they're thriving because they are metabolizing and getting energy based upon chemosynthesis, the complete opposite of photosynthesis. So, we keep learning all these new fundamental realities about what life can be and what it can't be. And then you have what I call the human issue, because it is definitely a human issue. We have 5 fundamental senses by which we judge the universe. And if you can't touch it, taste it, hear it, smell it, etc., it's very hard for us to understand anything that's beyond that. And yet, the reality is most of the universe lies beyond that. So what do I mean? Take my cell phone, for example. If I had the ability to see in cell phone vision, right, I would perceive the world through Wi-Fi and through 5G and through GPS.
Yes. And
I would see a completely different reality. It's just like you and me sitting here right now. I'm using my eyes. Behind you, there's a reality that you can't perceive. I can see it perfectly. And right now behind me, there's a reality that I can't perceive or interact with, but you can, right? And we're in the same place. We're in the exact same place. And there's 2 completely different worlds that you and I are experiencing right now. Then you have, so where I live in Wyoming, beautiful night skies. And if you look at the skies, wonderful for stargazing. If you look at that same part of the night sky with a radio telescope, you're going to see a completely different reality. You're going to see nebula, and you're going to see things, gas clouds there in different frequencies that we can't perceive. And that's realities where most of the universe lies, in the ultraviolet and the infrared spectrum, the X-ray spectrums. And that's the real universe. We perceive a tiny, tiny, tiny little sliver of what really is there. And we pretend, therefore that's the universe. No, that's actually 0.02% of the universe. And then you've got a scalability issue. Okay. What do I mean by scalability? If you look in any direction around you in space, the scientists say that the universal horizon of light, the farthest we can see into the depths of our universe, is roughly 13.6 to 13.9 billion with a B, billion light years in any direction, right? And we are this infinitesimally speck in the middle. What is a light year? It is the distance that light can travel in 1 year. So let's do the calculation here real quick for your audience. Light travels at 186,000 miles per second. Okay, 7.5 times around our planet in 1 second. Imagine how far you can go in a year, and now multiply that by 13.9 billion. So if we are in the middle, I can see that way 13.9 billion, that way 13.9 billion. That's roughly 27 billion light years across, and that's just the visible universe. Scientists actually believe that that's only 10% of the actual universe. And in just our universe, we can see more stars in our visible universe than there are grains of sand in all the beaches in all the world.
Yeah.
Right? And so if the universe is actually 100 billion light years across and possibly bigger, compared to us, that is enormously huge. But then look at Avogadro's number real quick. And this is important because I'm about to make my point here. If you compare one hydrogen atom Okay.
We got it on the screen.
Yeah. Okay, good. So that is to the power of 23. 1 times 10 to the negative 23. That is roughly one hydrogen atom is roughly the same scale and size as to us as we are to the universe. Meaning we have that infinite amount of space and scale inside every single human being. But as humans, we can only interact with maybe 1 or 2 orders of magnitude up or down because this is our size, right? We're kind of smack right in the middle of the universal scale if you were to have a scale. Most of the universe is either too big or too small for us to even interact with. That's reality. That is the realness of the human experience. But because we live in this little narrowly defined where we can only perceive a little bit, and our scale is either most of the universe is too big or too small, therein lies most of reality. That's where the universe is. And so for us to say that, oh, well, the only things out here and, there's a bunch of nonsense and hooey, man, I mean, that's math. That's reality. That's real, right? That's not Lue Elizondo telling you that's real. And so hubris is something that we have to be careful of because we're always trying to squeeze Mother Nature into a little box that we have invented, we've created. But Mother Nature doesn't operate that way. She doesn't need to be confined to a box. We're the ones living in a box. We just don't realize we do it to ourselves.
Which means that things that we may put outside of our box through Hollywood or stories that we tell, such as like alien abductions, may actually be something that we need to consider because there are things that don't have an explanation in our current physical world as we know it. There was a great quote in your book. You talked about the former director of something at Skunkworks, who said impossible is impossible until we fucking done it.
That's right.
And I put the fucking in there because I'm from Jersey.
Well, you're right.
You understand what I'm saying? So these things, you had to open yourself up to the stuff
Brother,
that you would have previously said was
today's
crazy.
technology is yesterday's magic.
Yeah.
And that is fact. Everything that we do, we're time and time again, we put these limitations. There was a time we said, well, Earth is the only thing, object that's made of rock, and the heavens are up there, and there's nothing else out there. And yet, this is all the while that we knew meteors existed. Rocks were falling to Earth all the time. How do you explain that? Right? They're coming from somewhere. There was times where we would always presume certain things. We'd never break the sound barrier until we did it. Right? There's all these things that science has said, well, we can never do. Until we do it, and then it becomes routine. And it's not science's fault. It's our fault because we make these presumptions and assumptions of what life should and could be, not realizing that we are overlaying our own human experience onto the data. So we are, by necessity, the fact that we're humans, we're already polluting the data because we have a hard time looking through any other lens than a human lens. And so we tend to ascribe human emotion, human intent, human motivation to things that may not be. And so back to where we were talking about the science, and this is why I bring up this long, drawn-out story about size and perception and things like that. People say, well, are they from outer space? They could be. But I've always said it could be from outer space, inner space, or frankly, the space in between. As you said, are these things interdimensional? Could be. Are they aliens from outer space? Could be. Are they as natural to this planet as we are? Absolutely. Is it to the point where now technologically we're at a point where we're now beginning to interact with them, just like the little beasties? Could be. Are these things maybe from underwater? Because look, we've only mapped less than 10% of the ocean floor. We know
all the above.
Or all the above, right? We know more about the surface of the moon than the depths of our own oceans. I had a submarine commander once tell me, and he was dead serious. It's a little funny. I'll share it with your audience, but it's both disturbing and funny. They were tracking an object. These submarines are huge. I mean, some of these are, imagine the Empire State Building sideways underwater, right? These are big, big submarines. Some of these 500 feet long, right? Big boys. And you're traveling underwater and you pick up something on sonar that's traveling roughly between 400 to 500 miles an hour underwater, and it's bigger than you, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so I asked the commander, honest question. I was kind of shocked. I'm like, well, in those cases, what do you do? And he looked at me. No, he looked at me straight face. He said, "We go around." A dumb question makes sense. Yeah, I guess I would too. Just like that. Totally like, yeah, we go around. I'm like, yeah, I'm not messing with that either.
Cool.
So, there's a lot to this conversation, and The problem is that we're always going back to the original conversation we were having about, people on both sides of the spectrum, skeptics and believers. Both of them are stuck to their own narrative. Both of them in the face of new information, even though that we live in a world that's dynamic. They are very hesitant to change their opinion because they're stuck in a static mindset. But the universe isn't static. The universe is dynamic. So we have to recalibrate the way we think. We can't think in a static way. We have to be dynamic with the universe if we want to understand the universe. And so that's kind of my philosophical perspective on the topic.
It's great philosophy. I appreciate all the depths of that. I was riveted by some of that. But again,
as you're snoozing, taking a nap, and
I'm not. I haven't been snoozing one
no,
second.
I'm kidding.
I'm already extremely pissed off that we only have 3 hours though, because holy shit, is there so much here? Like, you're saying something every 2 seconds. I'm like, oh, we could go there, we could go there, we could go there, we could go there.
Hey, so I can come back anytime you want, brother.
All right, we're definitely doing that then. But
we'll see. We'll see about what people say online. I'm sure.
Listen. Just don't look at the comment section. Okay, just don't do that, because people are going to say what they're going to say in there. But going back to the abduction stuff, because we keep getting off it. Did you come across cases that again, it's not like you were there, so you can't say 1,000% this happened. But did you come across one out of the billion people who are like, yeah, I was abducted and fucked by an alien, where you're actually like, ooh, wait, might have happened?
So for me, the most compelling, remember, we go back to data, right? Data. Let the facts speak for themselves. There was some situations where an individual had claimed to come up close and personal with a UAP, and they sustained a medical consequence. Now, I'm not a trained medical surgeon, right? I'm not. But we had people that were medical professionals that were supporting us. And they were working with individuals who could quantify and qualify. They could quantify and qualify medically changes in the person's physical health. They actually sustained injury. So there are several doctors. I want to be very careful because I don't want to mention their names until I'm publicly allowed to say their names, because for privacy reasons, I don't want them getting slammed and harassed. But there is enough information to substantiate from a medical perspective that we've had military service members and intelligence officials, intelligence individuals harmed by these things.
Rendlesham 1980. I had Nick Pope in here to break down that whole thing.
Brother, those two guys are on full 100% medical disability. I saw the paperwork from the U.S. government, and it says because the reason why the medical disability by the U.S. government, your tax dollars are paying for it because of their involvement in Rendlesham. And that's just one example. And thank God it was for late Senator John McCain, because if it wasn't for him, these guys would have been totally toast. He was the one who got their medical records that were classified by the Air Force, right? Classifying your medical records. Who do you think you are that you can do that? Anyways, it's my medical records. They classified them. And if it wasn't for John McCain getting them declassified, these guys would be suffering today, probably dead. Yeah. So, and that's just one example. I mean, there are other individuals. I can tell you right now, a very former senior CIA official, very, very senior, like one of the top guys. I do not have permission to talk about his story. But him and his spouse came up close, had a very terrifying experience, and actually a foreign object was removed from
his body,
from her. So it was a husband and wife team.
Okay, without saying their name, what was the nature? Of the
I want to be really careful. There's HIPAA and patient confidentiality, so I'm sure that person is going to probably at some point come out. This is why Congress is now taking this topic seriously, because there are people like, hey, yeah, guess what? That senior dude who I know is now coming and telling me about their experience. People are feeling that it's a little bit more safer now to come out and have this conversation with the right people. We are trying very hard to create an environment where people feel safe. They can come out and talk about their experiences, whether they worked on legacy programs or that they were somebody under medical care by the U.S. government. These are all little factoids that most people have no idea even exist.
Well, you talk about your own experiences too, and it hasn't affected you health-wise like some of these other ones, but you talked about how, I guess shortly after being assigned to this desk for the first time, you started to notice orbs in your house in Kent, and your wife did too. Can you tell me what happened?
And let me be clear, because I can't tell you with a straight face that they're UFO related or they're UFOs. I can't.
That's good. So you're open-minded on that.
Oh, 100%, brother. Yeah. Let me tell you again. Let's go to the facts, right? I get into this program AATIP, and here's the facts. we start seeing these green luminous balls of light diffuse, some the size of maybe a volleyball, some the size of a little baseball. And they're witnessed not only by me, otherwise I wouldn't have said anything. They're witnessed by my spouse, and they're also witnessed by my kids, and even some of our neighbors are seeing these balls of light.
Outside your house?
Inside the house.
Inside the house.
Down the hallway, just going by, almost like a really bizarre.
Volleyball up to that size?
Yeah, but remember, diffuse, right? So it's not like it's just, it's the glow pattern comes up to about here. And then so these are being witnessed. And at the same time, other individuals that were part of AATIP are also having a similar experience. So what we do know is that other people in the AATIP program were also experiencing this. Now, could it be ball lightning? Sure. Could it be St. Elmo's fire? Sure. Could it be faulty wiring and now it's ionizing the air local around it and it's creating these luminous plasma balls? 100%. What makes it interesting is it wasn't just us. It was other people in AATIP who were also experiencing it while they were working in AATIP. Before AATIP didn't have the problem, and after AATIP didn't have the problem, only during AATIP. So that's the facts. But whether they were actually UAP or related UAP, I can't tell you that. I don't know.
Approximately how many times did this happen, and over what type of time period are we talking about?
So 2010 to probably 2017, 16, probably... so I say like once every couple months, people are like, oh, then, every 2 months. No, because sometimes you'd see it back to back in a couple of days. And then it might be 2, 3, 4 months. And then all of a sudden 3 more days go by and you're seeing these green balls of light in the house, even and outside as well. So there wasn't any pattern. That's one thing, obviously trying to find a pattern to this. It's coming every Tuesday.
It's random.
Yeah, random. And of course, we're asleep at night and I'm not at home during the day. So I'm only seeing them while I'm at home, and same with my family. My kids are at school. My wife is working too. So it could have been much more frequent, but we just weren't there to see it.
Did you report this to Puthoff or Davis or people on the AATIP team?
Yeah, they call it, they had a term for it. They called it high strangeness.
High strange. What do you mean?
I don't know.
Ask
them. I don't know what the hell it means. They call it high strange. Okay. Yeah, strange. You're right.
Did they come in and investigate it though? Like, did they try to set up anything?
No, they had no issue with it at all. They said it's very, very normal for that to happen.
They said it was normal.
Yeah,
so someone on the AATIP team, counter intel guy, is now seeing...
Not counter intel. Oh, yeah, I was counter intel.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Is now seeing orbs in his house while you're working on this project about these UAPs.
Right.
And the team that's in charge of UAPs doesn't want to go investigate that.
No, they're saying that they're having the same issue too. They're like, well, what do you want to do about it? I don't know.
Set up a camera, Ghostbusters, get Bill Murray in there, do something. Right?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, once every few months, you'd have to have a lot of cameras. I don't have a setup like this. I can't afford anything this fancy.
Listen, I'll donate these.
We're
going to find Man Bear Pig in there, baby. Let's get Al Gore on the line.
There are other individuals that are, I think, going to be coming out of the shadows here soon that will probably also expound upon their experiences. This is really just kind of the tip of the iceberg. Fortunately for us, it was just orbs. For other people that had other experiences, not my story to tell. I did not experience it with them, but it was peculiar. It was peculiar.
All right, real quick, I just gotta go to the bathroom. We'll be right back.
Well, that's because I have the mentality of a first grader. I mean, I've got to keep shit simple because I'm with you. I tell people all the time, when I walk into a room, the IQ drops about 20 points automatically. So, I gotta color by the numbers, man. Otherwise, I can't keep up.
All right. Well, let's get back on. We're good over here? All right. We're back. Lue, one of the things that you laid out throughout your book, just for like context, I thought was really good, was a lot of the alleged and I would say even like known history involving UAP that have been witnessed or incidents that have occurred. And what you explained is that once you were first brought into this, you started going through whatever government documents you could, which includes stuff that we could all get through FOIA, and then also included some things that would be like classified that you couldn't take
there was
out of
actually
facility.
A lot of classified. You'd be surprised. There's actually a lot. Now, they have since, I think, tightened the reins on it and probably put some restrictions. But in the early days, on the classified system, on the high side, we call high side the top secret system, you could just do a word search and just you avoid some of what we call the dirty words
Yeah,
that
hot
get you in
words,
trouble.
right?
Yeah, hot
Yeah.
words. But man, you could find all sorts of great intelligence out there, man, about these things. And it was really, really helpful. It was really helpful.
How did you know? Yeah, you talked about these hot words terms like, oh, if you do that, you're going to get flagged and called in somewhere and maybe be pulled from the program. How did
Yeah.
you even know what those words were? Did you ask like Hal Puthoff about that?
So where I was, we knew what some of those hot words would be, especially if there were people in a legacy capacity that didn't want you to know. So certainly like, UFO, right? Unidentified flying object, no surprise there. But you could look at things like anomalous. Another would be unidentified aircraft, because a lot of time people would write a report saying we have an unidentified aircraft doing, Mach 22, right? Which there's no aircraft that does Mach 22. Or you could also write in, for example, luminous as a word, which is bright, right? So when you talk about a luminous object in the sky, well, you would type luminous and then type in sky, and then all the reports about something that was luminous in the sky, right? So there's ways to do it. Now it could be a rocket, test rocket, right? Where now you could say, well, the rocket as it was ascending up to 25,000 feet created a luminous halo up in the atmosphere that was observed for the last, for 120 miles. And so that's a rocket test, obviously. But then when you have others where they're talking about luminous balls of light doing other things, and you're okay, well, that's not a test rocket, because rockets go in a very specific trajectory, right? And they don't change directions very often. So when you're seeing reports of these things maneuvering in a certain way over a certain country, the problem is it gets kind of difficult because a lot of the information is classified because of under the circumstances in which it was collected, right? So we classify information in this country for two reasons: to protect sources and to protect methods. It is in fact illegal to classify information simply for the sole purpose of trying to hide information that's of either illegal activity or malfeasance or even embarrassing to the U.S. government. You can actually look at it. There's a DoD directive I can show you at some point if you're interested. But the problem is that the government was doing that. They were classifying information simply because they didn't want to tell people the truth about UAP, and that's a problem. And so you have this data that's out there, and let's say we get this information from a human source we're trying to protect, or we have some information from signals intercept over a particular country. You don't want to broadcast that, right? You don't want your enemy to know what you're doing and where you're doing it. So you classify that information. But what you can't do is classify information that doesn't relate to the protection of sources and methods, right?
How does it not relate to it, though, if it's involved with UAP, which is like the ultimate national
There's no source. Perfect example. The fact that North Korea has a nuclear capability, that's not classified. Now, how those things work and what are they aimed at and how that's classified. Yeah, 'cause that's sources and methods. But the mere fact that country X has nukes, that's not a classifiable fact. The mere fact that we're not alone in the universe, that's not a classifiable fact, right? It's like Galileo when he first proposed that the Earth was not the center of the solar system, right? What happened? Well, we burned him on the stake, right? So he had to recant. That's not a classifiable fact. You can't restrict the citizens of a country from knowing, forgive the pun, an inalienable right. This is facts of life, of truth.
So you're telling me that all of our adversaries or countries out there that may not be necessarily benevolent, if you will, you're telling me that any weaponry they may have, including things that are beyond our imagination right now, let me just throw an example out there, some sort of biological warfare weapon that's not sarin gas or something more basic that we at least understand. You're telling me that all that right now,
brother, look
if
at
it's not declassified, should be.
Here's the reality, right? Yes, it should be. Look, the fact that Russia has hypersonic weapons, that's not. We've admitted that. They know it. We know it. Everybody said it. We have news reports on it all the time. Now, how they work and how are they deployed and where are they deployed and what are their capabilities are, absolutely keep that classified because we don't want the bad guys to know that we know all of that. But the mere fact that they exist, that's not a classifiable fact. The fact that something exists. Now, you can classify a U.S. capability that exists because we don't want to let the bad guys know.
So what is the difference in the gray area with this and that? If we think, I'm just playing a hypothetical here because I want to know all of it, by the way. But if we have data on UAP that we think no one else may have or don't know if other people have.
would keep classified because that's capabilities, remember? So we're talking about sources and methods, and some of the methods by which we collect information is very classified. Where we're doing it, how we're doing it. You don't want the bad guys to know that. So you would classify certain things regarding capabilities, right? Again, North Korea has nuclear warheads. We know that. How they work and how they're used and their technology behind it, yeah, you protect that, of course.
Okay.
So there is some gray area, excuse me. And there is also there are some incidents where the mere fact of something existing can be classified. So for example, the fact that a U.S. government is involved in a particular mission under certain authorities like covert action, that is kept classified. We don't admit that we're involved in that effort. Okay, so you can, under certain legal circumstances, classify information and protect that information. But what you can't do is classify information that's not really related to source of methods or covert action, and that is trying to hide a fact about something that is not a classifiable fact. You know, it'd be like when the church tried to classify the fact that the Earth wasn't the center of the solar system. Well, that's reality. That's our current paradigm. And so, from my perspective, what drives me every single day isn't the UAP topic. People think, oh, UAP. It's not. It's ultimately. I took an oath to defend this country from all enemies, foreign and domestic, and I've never been relieved of that oath. And it turns out that in this particular case, it was the bureaucracy that we had some trouble with. The government, the U.S. government's really good at a lot of stuff. I mean, it's fantastic. The best country in the world, bar none. I mean, this country afforded my family opportunities no other country could or would. So I am extremely loyal to my country. I'm extremely loyal to my government. I'm extremely loyal to the citizens of this country. The problem is that there were people in government making decisions on behalf of the American people that they had no business making those decisions. They did not have the authority to do. And so for me, transparency and accountability. If you want a government to be accountable, you first have to be transparent. That's the only way you're going to get accountability. I had a conversation I'll share with you. I've started sharing it. It's very personal to me. So in the book, I talk about my mother passing away. My father recently passed away a couple years ago.
Sorry to hear that.
No, it's okay. And it's life, you know. He literally died with his boots on. Old revolutionary from Cuba.
Your dad was a savage, dude.
Dude, he was something else. That's
Tell people who your dad was. Come on.
So my dad was a revolutionary. He fought with Castro against Batista in Cuba, and then when Castro went communist, he joined the CIA program, trained in Guatemala, and was part of the Bay of Pigs invasion. He was a member of the Brigade 2506. Served several years in prisons in Castro's jails, and came back to the United States. He was a wounded soul. He experienced things there that I'm sure probably made him do certain things later in life. Incredible human being, very hardworking. Came to this country with not a dime in his pocket, and was self-made and all legitimate. And he instilled in me the sense of patriotism that I have. And he always told me things, about what it is to serve and why it's important to serve and sacrifice. But my father was also very intelligent. He was I don't know what happened because I didn't get his brains. But my dad was intellectual as well. And I remember, so my dad died 2 Father's Days ago. So Father's Day a couple years ago. And towards the end, he never told me he was dying, but I could tell. I could tell he was sick. He had cancer, but he didn't tell me. But towards the end, he stopped eating, and you can see when that starts to take its toll. So about a month before he died, I had an opportunity to go on a road trip with him. So we went from Wyoming.
A month before he died?
A month before he died. So we drove. Dude, my dad was
Guy has cancer a month before he
dying
died.
From cancer.
Taking a road trip.
Yeah, and he's going road trip. So we went
different.
From Wyoming all the way down. Yeah, for me, I'd be laying in bed and eating Cheetos and all the crap I'm not supposed to eat and doing all the stuff I'm not supposed to do. He goes on a road trip with his son, and we go from Wyoming down to, Miami, right, where all of us Cubans live. Where else?
Shoot me,
right. So we're going to Miami to see the family, and about halfway through, I think we're probably in Kansas somewhere, and I asked my dad, and I feel guilty about this because I asked him almost flippantly, like just to fill in, that, what do you think? So I said, Dad, what do you think is the greatest threat to humanity? Now I'm thinking to myself, is it a pandemic? Is it a disease? Is it warfare? Is it terrorism? My father sat for a moment and he looked at me and he said, corruption. And I said, corruption? Like what, financial corruption? He said, no. Corruption. Corruption is the act of sacrificing or giving away a core value you have in exchange for something else. So whether it's financial corruption, religious corruption, governmental corruption, moral corruption, you are trading away a core value in exchange for something. And so in government, when you do that, no matter where it is, if you are corrupt in government, you start chipping away at the very foundation of what democracy is. And my father warned me, he says, son, it's a very slippery slope from that to tyranny. It happens fast, believe me. It happens fast. So we have an obligation. This is a country where we have a government for the people and by the people. This is a government where if you're working in government, your job is to serve the interests of the American people, not the other way around. But people forget that in government. They start to think, no, actually, this is my job and I can start making decisions. And when they start making decisions on behalf of the American people that they're not allowed to, for example, in this particular topic, UAP, where you have people not informing members of Congress who have a need to know, who are supposed to know, they're not informing the chain of command, and they're not informing the President of the United States, that's a problem. That's illegal. You cannot do that, right? And either this Constitution and these rules mean something or they don't. And my response to them, look, if the rules don't apply anymore, that's fine. Just tell the American people because we know how to fix that shit. Trust me. We're pretty good at that. So, but don't these rules apply to thee and not to me, especially in government. You have a moral responsibility. You work for the people. And if you forget that, then you got to get the hell out of government. And this is, for me, this is part of transparency and accountability. It's not just the UAP issue. People say, oh, you're the UFO guy. No, I'm not. That's one thing. I am for government accountability and transparency. That's the only reason why this government works. That is the only reason we have faith and our faith and confidence in this government. That is the only reason why we have it, because it is supposed to be working the right way. And when it doesn't, because a few people make a unilateral decision that they don't want it to, that's a problem.
Okay, I appreciate that. And it's interesting, though, to hear the depth of that explanation, though. But before I go into what I'm going to go into, I do want to say, you allegedly left the Pentagon in 2017. Do you guys ever really leave? Come on. You did say you haven't given up that oath, or so. Didn't he say that like 10 minutes ago, Leslie? He's like, I still have never given up that oath.
Look, I've said this before. I still maintain my security clearance. Mm-hmm. And I do consult with the U.S. government on an as-needed basis. I've always made that very clear. I've never hid that fact.
He has never hidden that. I'll give you that. But what I'm going to say is that you have any disclosure that you've done, including this book and everything since 2017, you've been very careful to do everything in a legal manner.
100%.
Your colleague, Chris Mellon, when he walked the paperwork into the New York Times in 2017, was able to do that because of, I forget the name of the law and the stipulation, but because of a recent stipulation that had been passed in Congress that allowed him to do that. Obviously, this is something you were involved with. So you guys have done it by the letter of the law. I do need to say that. However, you talk about a government for the people and by the people, and that you have, I believe you phrased it something like a moral responsibility to report to people if something has been done that is compromising that. And yet you are also a guy who has strong criticism of Edward Snowden. Now, let me be very frank on how I look at Edward Snowden. I look at him as being stuck between a shit and a fart, okay? Slippery slopes on both ends. On one end, he sees the United States Constitution being trampled on by the government through some weird legal maneuvers that basically obfuscated what they were really doing from the courts. And when he did try to take that up the chain of command, they told him, fuck off, get out of here. So that's one problem. On the other hand, though, the minute he goes and reports something and breaks his oath, right? He had an oath that said, I swear to secrecy, anything that I'm told to keep secret in the government. He is now like, maybe his situation is good enough to do that, but he now sets a precedent where the next person can say, oh, I reported what I reported because Snowden did it. And maybe theirs is 99.9% the importance of his, and so on down. And eventually, you're down at 1% and people are reporting everything that happens in government. So either way, it's a problem. However, if you have that moral obligation, like you said, could you not see how someone like Snowden felt the way he did? Totally different scenario from UAP, to be very fair here, but felt the way he did from a constitutional perspective to come out and make that type of
I have
disclosure.
no problem with the way Snowden felt. I have a problem with what Snowden did. He took his information and gave it to the Russians. That's the problem.
He gave it to the Russians?
Yes. That's the problem. He didn't come out and whistleblow. He came out and spied. He leaked information, classified information. I've never done that. I've never purported to do it. I don't support it.
What do you mean he leaked it to the Russians?
Brother, that's why he went to Russia
Well, his plane got down by, at the time, Vice President Joe Biden. He was flying
Brother, he's living in Russia.
I know, but he was flying from
protection.
I know, but he was flying from Hong Kong to Ecuador, and his plane got downed in Russia by Biden.
You know what he had with him, right? He gave up that it wasn't just a Julian Assange. This is not like Private Manning did, where they were just trying to expose some things, which by the way was still wrong.
Yeah,
There's a right way and wrong way to do things.
Different situation.
Yeah, he actually compromised people who died. And that is a problem. There are people who are no longer alive right now.
So that's been disputed, though. There's people that say that there's no one who died as a result of it, though he may have risked it.
No, there are. I can't go into details. There are sources who died, and so from my perspective, I never took this information and ran to the hills. First of all, everything I've discussed has always been unclassified, and if I wasn't sure, I went to the Pentagon and I asked. So there is a big difference between going and running from your country and taking a bunch of classified information with you and releasing that. I never did that, and I never will do that, and I never have done that. And I think anybody who does that should go to jail.
Okay.
What I've done is to have the conversation. I've used the system to my advantage and to all of our advantage, I believe, I hope. And if you look at the track record, I think it's fair to say that we have, by doing it the right way, look, no one's gone to jail, and look how far we are. We now have Congress involved. We now have an arrow established. We now have rules and laws on the books, right? We have whistleblower protection. We have right now new legislation that's being proposed right now as part of the new NDAA. That's in the last 7 years, brother. Yeah. Think about it. We have gone further in disclosure in 7 years than in the last 70. And we didn't have to break any rules. We did it the right way. No one's gone to jail, and we can still have this conversation. So, I've always said there's a difference between doing things right and doing them right now. And I think if you have only one chance to do it right, then we need to do it that way. Now, could I be wrong? Sure. Are there other people that would have a difference of opinion and think it should be done the other way? Sure. And my response is, be my guest. Do what you want to do.
Like I said, it does need to be said that if you're looking at the record of what we know publicly about you and about the people involved, the things have been done more by the book, and there's something to be said for that, for sure. And I also think, this is also, I don't want to delegitimize it or anything by any means, but it's also such a pop culture phenomenon too, because people are like, oh, I want to know, right? So you can kind of develop, and this doesn't always go the right way, but you can develop like a fanboy syndrome where people want to know more, they want to know more, and you're going to give it to them. And
100%.
And that's why.
No, that's a problem, brother. And this is you're hitting the nail on the head for me. If I can just
Please.
jump in here. People confuse a messenger with a message all the time, and this is one of my personal struggles with people, because people will see someone and I'm sure this happens with you too, right? You have this persona that they have in their mind of you, of what you're doing, and then all of a sudden, you become the more important thing than what it is you're trying to communicate. And from my perspective, I try to remind people, look, I'm just like you. I have the same issues as you. I pay my bills like you. I have the same bias as you. I'm just a normal schmo. The only difference is I was in a position where I felt I needed to do something about it. I'm not a hero. I tell people that all the time. I have this horrible imposter syndrome that I have, because people say, oh, you're a hero. No, I'm not a hero, because I served with heroes and a lot of them didn't come back. So I know what a real hero is, and I'm not a hero. I'm just a guy finishing the job that he was given to begin with. And frankly, I've always told people this before. Anybody else in my situation, including you or anybody else who took the same oath I did and was in my job, would have probably done exactly the same thing I did. And arguably, you might have even done a better job than me. So I just happened to be the guy in the chamber at the time. And, okay, guys, here's the reality of things. But by no means, people say, well, you're leading this disclosure effort. I sure hope not. I really do, because I'm not the guy for that. This is a relay race, and my job is just to carry the baton as far as I can. And here you go. I'm not the guy who's going to win the race. I'm just one of the guys in a long chain to get us where we are. Look, you are just as part of this chain as I am. You're having this conversation with people right now in your audience. You have a global reach. Now think about that for a second. Think about that responsibility. You, today's day and age, right now, have a larger global audience than many of the world leaders just 10 years ago. You have that, right? So you are very much part of this effort as well. So I'm just one dude, just like you're just one dude.
But we also all, and this includes you too, we don't want to be a useful idiot in that as well. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? You can only know what you know. I mean, really, from my seat, because I literally sit in an armchair here, you've at least been on the inside, but have you ever thought about that too? Because it's not like you were head of the CIA or something, you were high up or whatever, but have you thought about the idea that maybe you were given access to things like, and I'm not delegitimizing you as a person, I'm saying like, let's drop some nuts and let's get the best squirrel that we know is going to
manipulate, then we can manipulate them to go ahead and put our message. That's always a possibility. But then you're talking about a conspiracy on a level that would be so cost prohibitive and the coordination so tight, because most of these people like me had access to just about almost everything. So you would have to keep a long-running secret, and you'd have to backstop it for years beforehand, like decades, if you wanted to execute this. And then you have to ask the reason why. Why? There's so much easier ways to do it. If you want more funding for space technology, all you got to say is, look, this is what the Russians are doing. Okay, here's your money. You don't got to go through this elaborate dance and, hire a bunch of people to pretend that they saw something and make fake radar footage and make fake FLIR videos and make fake, gun camera footage. I mean, that's why. There's so much simpler ways to do it, and more effective ways. You would spend more money creating this illusion than you would ever get as an end result trying to fund some sort of program. It doesn't make financial sense. You're going to spend $1 billion to make $1 million? Well,
just tell them the UFOs are eating the dogs. They're eating the cats. You can go get all the funding you want.
Yikes. I'm not going there with a 10-foot pole.
That's okay. I had to throw that one in there. I see what you're saying, though. I think that's a fair point. It's like, why would you go away from what works just for the sake of doing it? It's been proven over and over again. It's not like the military-industrial complex has a problem saying yes to a bill if it's a threat from another country.
That's right. That's what funds the war machine. Why would you come up with some cockamamie elaborate? First of all, anyone who would approve that would be a moron. I'm sorry. That's a big no, And oh, by the way, if it ever comes out, because eventually it will, if that was the case, then we're all going to jail.
Yeah, but you also, with this topic, because of the nature of its relation to meaning of life, if you will, you ran into a problem in the Pentagon that, you described it as like mind-blowing to you that this would ever happen, and it's mind-blowing to me too, which is like with the quote-unquote Collins elite. So you, at some point within AATIP, growing as a hub within there, you started to run into people where you didn't, the way you described it in your book is that you didn't necessarily know who they were. They almost operated silently, where there was a large contingent in this 22,000 person fucking place, the Pentagon, that had their biblical beliefs dictate how they wanted to handle something like this, which was really in a lot of ways to say, don't handle it. And I believe there was one guy who you had previously respected who at some point,
and still respect, by the way. I still respect that person.
Okay, so he pulled you aside at one point and said, Lue, you're getting into demonic shit here. Have you read your Bible lately? And you're looking at him as an intel guy whose job is national security going, I'm sorry, my Bible?
Right.
Like, do you understand why at home this seems wild to someone like me or a lot of people listening, that like a religious belief is going to...
Oh, brother, don't look now, but when's the last time you pulled $1 out of your pocket? What's it saying there? In God we trust.
Yeah.
Look, I hate to break it to you, but a lot of our country was based on certain moral principles and even religious values. That's a fact. There's a reason why we have a national cathedral, right, and things like that. That's not a bad thing. This country it's okay to have faith in this country. In fact, I am a man of faith. I don't wear my religion on my sleeve, and I'm very personal about it. But people know when you read my book, I was raised Jewish. That's the way I was raised. I went to Hebrew school and wore yarmulke, and on my father's side they were Catholic. So my mother's side, she chose to raise me Jewish. I don't have a problem with faith. In fact, I think faith is important. It gets people through a lot of things. What I have a problem with is when people overlay their faith on a national level security issue. Now, is it that strange that happens? No. We have national prayers all the time that our presidents lead, right? So faith is important in our country, and I'm not blaming anybody if they believe that these things are demonic or they're anti-Christian. And by the way, I don't want to villainize the Christians either because it's not a Christian issue.
Yeah, neither am I, by the way.
Yeah. No, I got it. But I guess I want to make clear that, look, extremism, by any other word, is still extremism. Whether it's Muslim extremism, Christian extremism, Judaism extremism is extremism. We can all agree on that. And that's my concern. It's when people that are in the government are exercising their views in a way that's unilateral without allowing other people to be part of that conversation. That is a problem for me. Now, I believe faith is great to have, and if it's a moral compass for you, fantastic. But I don't think that we have the right to impose our religious views in a decision process over other people who may not share that. Look, I often try to explain to people there's really two types of truths in the world. Because people say, there's only one truth. No, that's not true. There's actually two types of truths in the world. There is a universal truth, like gravity, right?
Yep.
Affects us all the same. Then there's a personal truth. The personal truth is like religion or politics, right? It can be just as truthful to you as gravity, but it might not be to him. It's a personal truth.
And it may not be backed by the evidence.
And it might or might not be backed by the evidence. And so we have to understand what we can't do is apply a personal truth in a universal decision. A universal truth like gravity, yes. But you cannot, this is why, whether it's political or religious or anything else, a personal truth should never be used in a decision that affects more than yourself. And it's hard to do. It's hard to do because you think you're doing the right thing. You think everybody feels that way and everybody's like you, but they're not. And that's what we have to avoid. This is part of that human experience again, right? We're looking through a lens that say, well, this is my personal truth and it's a universal truth. Well, is it really though? I mean, it's a personal truth, but is it really a universal truth? And if it's not, then maybe you should try to remove that personal truth out of the equation and just stick to the universal truths. But that's hard to do. Because a lot of people don't even know the difference. I don't care if you're liberal or conservative or anywhere in between. People have their opinions. And man, there are people that are really believe in their opinions. They're willing to do extreme stuff because their personal truth they think is a universal truth. Man, and they do things that don't think for 1 second somebody who I hate to be crude here, but burns himself alive in protest. That's a universal truth for them, even though for us it may be a personal truth. I mean, they are willing to give their lives for it, right?
Right.
So we have to understand that. And in government's no different. Religion's no different, where a personal truth becomes a universal truth. That's the reason why ISIS felt the way they did, because, they think, well, the whole world needs to be the way this is universal truth. And I'm not bashing on anybody who's Muslim. Most of my friends were Muslim in college. But extremism, again, is extremism. Whether it's Muslim extremism, Christian extremism,
doesn't matter what it is.
Extremism, that's right. It doesn't matter what it is. And then you have governmental extremism. And that's also a problem.
How much did they impact? How much was that a constant thorn in your side as it pertains to actions that could or could not be taken by AATIP?
You know what? There was some people, I won't say the person's name, there was another individual that was part of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence who's very well known, very vocal about his personal views, religious views, and he made decisions based off of it. Again, it's one of those things. It didn't affect us other than maybe for funding, but I did not feel day to day that there was this pressure by them. We got up to a certain point and they kind of said, stop here. Yeah. Like, whoa, okay. And we didn't stop. So, other than a curiosity of saying, wow, that's interesting. I actually came face to face with one of these guys. It did not, I don't think it really impacted. Now there's other people in AATIP that will probably violently disagree. Like, oh man, these are the guys that created such a headache for us. And they did. I think that story will probably come out at some point. They did make our life hell for a while. ironically enough, right? But it didn't affect me that much personally.
Well, one of the arguments a lot of people who may be purely on the religious side make is that, you know, they'll point to the fact that we have no physical evidence of this stuff. It just leaves a mark, so it's a demonic creature. And, you know, look at Leviticus 10:15. It'll tell you that's why that hole's right there in the wheat field or whatever. But
isn't religion itself, what facts are they basing it in other than Scripture? I mean, religion itself takes faith.
Exactly.
Right? Religion itself is belief in the supernatural, whether you like it or not.
Yes.
Now, and it's not a bad thing. It's just, it is.
It is.
So there's no evidence that you have right now. It's a story that someone written down and you decide to accept it as truth. And by the way, that's a personal truth, right? That you feel is a universal truth. But at the end of the day, you don't have evidence. You weren't there. You didn't see the parting of the waters. You didn't see the miracles and the water into wine. You weren't there.
Agreed entirely. And to your point that you brought up earlier in the conversation, it can exist on the other side of this with a religion and UFOs or something, saying like, oh, were you there in Virginia in 96?
That's right.
You know what I mean?
That's right.
So
which, by the way, could you make a really good point
Please,
here, which is, I think, is something I've never really addressed. If we're not careful with this UAP topic, if it hasn't already started to, it could become a religion, and we need to avoid that.
Oh, it has started.
Hope not. Because that is not the intent of these conversations, and it should not be. It should not be a religion. And I am concerned that in 20, 30, 40 years, 100 years, 200 years from now, it could very well be a religion, and it should not be a religion.
Yeah, Lou, I think it already has become that way, and I think you're actually I guess like unwitting guinea pig with that, unfortunately, because again, you talked about being the messenger with, you know, just delivering a message here, and there's people who view that as prophetic. On the other end of it, there's people that also view that as whatever the opposite is, you know, like the devil. So when I look at you, this is a good time to go into this to really address like head on where you're coming from. In the past, episode 151, I had Ron James in here, who's talked with you before for his documentary, and then episode 179, I had a Nick Pope. I think like 3 hours into Nick Pope's, we talked about yours. Nick is another guy who comes from government or whatever. And in these conversations and in some others, a point where I've been critical of you is based on the words that you've said yourself in the past and actually said to me before we were on air today, which is that, you know, this is a fact. Like, you are an intel guy.
Right.
So I always joke and go, all right.
I am.
I'm like, all right, Fed, like, what do we got right here?
Right.
But online, you see two things. You either see people who are like, no, he's been sent by God, you know, not literally, God himself to deliver the great word of
Jesus,
UAP.
don't say that, man.
And then you have people on the other side who are like, you know, abolish every three-letter agency. This is our scumbag Fed coming out here and doing whatever. I was more in the middle in the sense that I'm like, okay, maybe he just really is a part of an op and he's read in on things that I'm not. So maybe there's a good reason for that, but I don't fucking know. So my job is not to sit here, therefore, and believe what he says because, again, he's worked in the government and, you know, it could be like, if this is a topic I'm interested in, like I am in UFOs, UAPs, he may be saying things that are not true. Maybe for a good reason, maybe for a bad reason too. Maybe you're a bad guy, Lou. Right. But like, I don't know this. Now, I see 3 doors with you. Maybe there's like 5, but we're going to put it down to 3. Number 1 is, you know, let's call it like the Stephen Greenstreet door. He's completely full of shit. He's making it all up. There's no record of anything. And I disagree with Stephen on some of the evidence that he's uncovered there. But he's like kind of the heel to it, right? He's the opposite. The second door is you're either mostly telling the truth or like almost all the truth. Maybe there's some things that, you know, you reviewed the evidence and you got it wrong, but like you're out here and you're actually giving all the information and it's in a purely kind of benevolent way, like you've said, where you feel like you have a moral duty to tell people things that they have a right to know, that humanity has a right to know, to say nothing of the United States of America's citizens. The third door is it's a mix. And the third door could be that it's like, you know, and this is a strong word to use, but it could be like some sort of psyop where, let me just paint a picture here. You guys on the back end, you know, a 22-year intelligence veteran, if you're still in, a 29-year intelligence veteran, You have access to such crazy information that you have been able to simulate how society may handle this information if it was given to them, to the point that you are able to see, using all your great tools back there, that like, ooh, this could cause ontological shock or an existential crisis if we just dump this on people. Therefore, someone like a Lue Elizondo, someone like a Chris Mellon, someone like a David Grush could be sent out there to reveal some truths in the midst of other stuff that might not be true, or more likely revealing truths to make it sound really important when in reality the crazier shit is over here and you want to, I don't know, limited hangout, get people away to focus on this. So when you look at these three doors, obviously the first one you're going to disagree with, which is that, Lue's full of shit, his career wasn't real. Yeah. But when you look at the other two doors, could you see why people might make the argument on door 3 there?
I can see why people see all 3 doors. And there's more doors than that. I mean, I can tell you the door that I think I'm in.
Okay. Let's hear that.
But it's a little different. First of all, let me put cards on the table. If you ask me to choose between national security and disclosure, like real national security, I will always choose national security. I've never made any bones about it. I love my country and I will protect and defend this country. Period. Full stop. Secondly, I want government accountability. That's what I want, whether it's with this topic or another topic. There is a right way and a wrong way to do things. I am very concerned, and it's probably because of my old generation, based upon the previous studies, that some people can find this information disruptive, okay? What we call catastrophic disclosure. I don't want that. I want constructive disclosure. I want to tell the American people, let them have whatever they can have legally, up to that point that they can't have it anymore. But that's not my decision to make. All I can do is continue to try to push for it. Ultimately, it's the government's decision to do that. And I won't override the government. I won't do it. I've made it very, very clear. I am not trying to hurt or disrupt our government. I'm trying to help it. It's backed itself into a corner for 70 years plus, potentially, for decades. And now we're at a point that people have the lowest level of faith and confidence in our government and our institutions. Why? Because we haven't been honest with the American people. Oh, the Pentagon never lies, right? Unless you talk about the Pentagon Papers, unless you talk about, Iran-Contra, unless you talk about the Afghanistan withdrawal. I mean, we haven't been. And our government has done some terrible things to people in the past. Look at the syphilis experiments. I mean, we let people die, man. I mean, that's die.
Government killing people? It would never happen.
Yeah, right. So, my point being is that the government hasn't always been necessarily looking at the best interests of the American people. But this is a topic, I think, where I always believe that America can handle the truth. I think America deserves the truth. And I think there's a right and wrong way to have the conversation. And I want us to have a conversation, like I said, both from a national security perspective, but then there's the other part of the conversation that affects everybody differently and yet equally, right? Whether it's philosophically or psychologically or sociologically or even theologically. My hope is that the American people can have the conversation for themselves and at that point make the decision what it means to you. And then if at the end of the day you guys say, yeah, great, go get a Big Mac, fine. But at least you had the opportunity to have that conversation, right? You make that decision for yourself. And at that day, I will work at Walmart. I'm cool. No sweat. Done. But at least be able to have the conversation. That's what I want to see happen. That is the door I am in. And yes, I am still very loyal. Yes, I will still defend my country and work for my government if asked to and when asked to. But it's not an either or. It's like, oh, well, since he does that, he must be not for the people. That's bullshit, man. We are creating a fake narrative. We're creating a binary solution. This is not a binary thing. It's not either or. Either you're loyal to the government or you're loyal to the American people. It shouldn't be that way. You should be able to be loyal to both. That's what you should be. And it can be that way. And that's what it used to be. And that's what it should be again. Because remember, government for the people, by the people. It's not this big monolithic thing there that's, there's government, then there's a people. Because if that's the case, then, man, we're lost. We're done. This is then, you know what? Forget society. We'll go move to Canada or something because that's not the way our government was supposed to be. People died in wars. We fought revolutions so we could have that power. So the people made the decisions. and you have a representative government that are interested in the interest in the will of the people. This is we are going to lose the whole thing if we don't recognize that. It'll be gone, and then everything that everybody's doing is going to be a waste. This is my concern, and I know what revolution is because my family came from it. And people don't realize that. And all these little nitnoids out there in the Twitter sphere who armchair quarterbacks who've never served their country, never served a day in their life doing anything other than being selfish and doing something for themselves have no freaking clue what's actually going on. And they create drama. They're not interested in the drama. They manufacture the drama. They're actually out there wanting the drama. And then they watch how it goes down. Oh, look, I made an impact. Someone made a comment. That is not my focus. That's why I don't deal with it. I don't care about it. My focus is on this type of conversation. This is a national level conversation. And by the way, it's not just with UAP. You can see it right now. Look at the two people we have that are vying for president. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to say bad or good about either one, but let me ask you this. Is there anybody else probably, maybe, kind of, sort of,
literally
who could
everybody
be qualified?
Yeah.
Right? Is that really, really, really America's best?
No.
Or are we just, well, you know what? I'll go ahead and compromise with, that person because that one over there I hate just a little bit more.
Right.
And so, and we see this all the time. And then we see the active pitting against each other. There are people out there that are these agent provocateurs that thrive off of it. Wouldn't it be great if
online, you're saying?
Everywhere, even in the media, mainstream media. Wouldn't it be great if a president candidate came out and said, you know what? I'm not going to say anything bad about my opponent. In fact, my opponent probably make a damn good president, but let me tell you where we differ. This is my perspective on how we should fix things. And then the other person, well, this is how I think we should fix it. Imagine that.
That'd be nice.
Instead of just throwing, he said, she said, he said, she said.
Which is all it is.
Which is all it is. That's all it is. And it's to the point where we think it's normal now. It's like a Super Bowl, my team versus your team. It's not a Super Bowl, man. This is life. This is our country. It's not us versus you. We're all in this shit together, man. And so, forgive me for being emotional about this, but this is what drives me. And when people try to put in a false narrative or try to, well, Lue must think this or Lue must think that. You know what? Think for yourself. Don't worry about what Lue thinks. It doesn't matter what Lue thinks. What matters is the facts and the details, and then make your decision for yourself. Don't be lazy.
Right.
Do your research, right? Understand what's actually happening here. And don't expect some person to give you a soundbite, because now we watch the media. Not only do we want to know the news, but we want to know even what to feel about it, right? So what do? We turn into our little echo chamber, depending on what side of the aisle we're on politically, and we watch our shows. Right. And we're not willing to watch, I don't like them. They're biased. Hey, don't look now, dummy. So are you. Yeah. How about expand your horizons and look at other sources of information and start thinking for yourself? That is what this country used to be. There used to be a point where you could get on the news. You had no idea the political affiliation of any of the reporters because it was just the facts.
That was a nicer world. I got Walter Cronkite up in the corner up there because
absolutely
that was a better world to live in.
Well, that was an honest world to live in, even when we were doing dishonest things, right? And this is my concern. This is my concern with where we are now as a country.
Hey guys, if you haven't already, please be sure to share around this episode on social media and with your friends. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Reddit. It's all a huge help, and I appreciate all of you who have been doing that each week.
And this is why it frustrates me so bad, because ultimately at the end of the day, my focus is not the UFO community. It never has been. It's on the other 99.9% of the population that's never even considered this topic seriously. That's my focus. And through this, maybe we can have a bigger conversation about what? Accountability, transparency, and anti-corruption. That's really what I'm hoping to pursue here. This is why this topic, this is just one example. It's a big one, a really big one. But this is just one example of things we got to fix in this country.
But if you can recognize, and I agree with you, that we're living in a country now where people... It's devolved to such a point of he said, she said, and shit that like these are the presidential candidates we have to choose from, and it's a giant reality show. Just at a high level, one example right there to say nothing of the rest of the internet that we can all see. I can see how psychologically people that you've spent your career around sitting in serious rooms like SCIFs that have seen all the worst shit that this world has to offer and know things through the literal job description of your jobs that, we'll never know, or,
Right.
maybe we'll find out 100 years from now when it gets declassified. I can see how psychologically there's this boundary that forms where suddenly you guys in your groupthink in this scenario are like, look, we actually know what's going on here, and we're going to save the people from themselves because they have no fucking idea what
100%. There are people, and this is one of the things I explored, because there are people, this is why people, I'm so glad you brought this up. You could not be more accurate. There are people now who want disclosure and they want their pound of flesh. All these people that are part of legacy efforts, put them in front of a court and put them all in jail for lying to the American people. I don't think that's the way to do it. I think what we do is we incentivize them. We give them an award, give them a promotion, say, hey, listen, great. Thank you for your interest in national security. Good job. Now's the time to have the conversation. I think that most of these people that kept this so secret for so long actually believed in their heart they were doing it for the right reason. I think there were people out there who actually felt, look, we already had studies done. We know that the American population can't take this right now. They cannot process this information. They're too worried about Russians and nukes and all this other stuff. We're not going to put that as a priority right now. And by the way, no use having this conversation with the American people because we still have no idea where they're from or what they want or how it works or anything like that, right? Yeah. We're just now scratching the surface. So it's just like when we were flying the U-2 over Russia, and Russia never, ever, ever made an issue. We flew it in contravention of an actual treaty with them that we would not fly manned reconnaissance missions over mainland Russia. And what do? We built the U-2 with the CIA and Lockheed Martin Skunkworks, and we start flying them. And the Russians never reacted. So we thought, hey, the plane flies too high and too fast. They can't detect it. The Russians were tracking every single flight from day one. The only reason why they didn't make an issue of it is why? Because they didn't have a capability to neutralize it. And it wasn't until they were able to actually successfully shoot one down with an SA-2 surface-to-air missile did they tell the world the reality, hey, look what America is doing, right? So why admit a problem for which there is no solution? I can understand from a national security perspective, people in our own government having that same mindset. Why are we going to acknowledge a problem which we don't even understand yet? I get that. I don't agree with it, but I can respect that understanding. I can respect that mindset. And in their hearts, they feel like they really are doing their patriotic duty. So from that perspective, I get it. And back to what you just said to me, a bunch of guys sitting around in a SCIF and saying, hey, these morons can't handle it.
I'm not saying that's their attitude. I'm saying it's like a passive feeling that comes in like, oh my God, if only these people knew. You know what I mean?
Well, but that's every day in the intelligence world, brother. I mean, I don't sleep well at night because of crap I've learned. And it has nothing to do with the UAP community. I mean, I'm telling you, that's the cost of information. People say, oh, I want to know. But, you go to the doctor and the doctor says, hey, listen, before we talk, you want me to be truthful with you, everything, right? On your I want tell me about my medical exam. You sure you want me to be truthful with you? Yeah, I want you to be truthful with me. You have stage 4 cancer. Oh shit. I wish you would have been truthful with me. I mean, I would have been better off not knowing that. Or going to a friend and saying, hey, listen, this fiance you have, yeah, great guy, great gal. Do you want to, I've got some information. Do you want me to share it with you? Yeah, let me know. You sure? Yeah, of course I want to know. They've been cheating on you the entire time. Oh, I didn't want to know, right? So in intelligence is like that. You learn things all the time that probably would be better off not knowing, but it's your job. And so that's not just with the UFO stuff. That's with a lot of things, national security. There's a lot of things that would keep people up at night. Fortunately, we have really good people in the intelligence community that are professionals and they can do their job. And their job is to stop the worst thing from happening. And most of the time, they're very successful with that. So, if there was any type of consolation prize in this, is that there are very, very good people, very patriotic people who lose sleep every night so we don't have to.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important that we don't villainize everybody in the government. The moment you say, oh, I worked intel, oh, you're one of those. All right, look, it was a job, okay? But we didn't do it to deceive anybody else. We were deceiving the enemy, not you, not the American people weren't the enemy, Denial and deception and information operations and all those things. You do it to fight and win wars. You don't do it because you're bored. You don't do it because, you're just, let's go figure something out to go and be disruptive. That's not the way it works. And I think that's part of the problem we have in this conversation because not our conversation, but in the bigger conversation, because there's such a lack of trust in the government now. This is why it's important now more than ever. We need to show good faith in the government. We have to do it. And because right now,
I see what I thought you said. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So you see in the context I'm trying to say here, right?
Yes.
So this is, again, why this accountability and transparency is so important. Now, at the end of the day, is there a better way to do it? Could be. Could be. Could I be wrong in this approach? Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think people are always going to be skeptical because of the fact that we've seen such, as you laid out yourself with some examples, we've seen such a breakdown in the trust of institutions through some things that they have done wrong, which again, and this is unfortunate, but my friend Jared Dillian, who I had on the podcast for episode 182 or 183, he is a former Lehman Brothers guy. And he had this line in a memoir he wrote about Lehman Brothers, is that he put it like this. He said there were approximately 20,000 people who worked at Lehman Brothers. And I can tell you 19,995 of them were really good at their jobs and tried very hard.
That's right.
Now, I always amend it to probably 19,970, but you get the point.
Yeah.
It takes a very small turd in the punch bowl to ruin that punch bowl.
Right. And that's why in government especially it's so important. This is my anti-corruption issue here, because it just takes a few people in government to do bad things and the entire government looks like crap. And this is another concern, because it's easy to blame the government. Oh, this government is big, huge, monolithic thing. No, government's just made of people. And there are some good people, really good people in government, and there's a couple that, not so good.
Not good. Yeah.
Not so good, right? And unfortunately, it kind of paints with a broad stroke the entire government. And so it's important we don't villainize the government. It's like a police officer. Yeah, there's a couple dirty cops out there, but most of them are putting their life on the line to save your ass, And they're good people. They go home, they pay their bills, and they're putting their life on the line every day for you. Same with our military, same with our intelligence professionals. But it just takes one or two, and now you've got a corrupt police department.
That's right. Now, look, if we're going to be fair and we're going to be assessing the morality and the actions of the government, we also have to look at the other side of this, which is something you outline in your book pretty well, which is the contract side, the private side. So you learned through this program that companies, I'm just going to name a couple here, like Lockheed and Northrop, had been in, I'll just use my own term, like in lockstep with previous UFO-related things with the government, to the point that you allege you saw evidence through the files you had access to show that companies like a Lockheed, like a Northrop, had been in charge of UFO crash retrievals and given so much authority by the government in this case as like a hand-in-hand military-industrial complex, I guess, in a way, such that the evidence recovered from these were in places that you had no idea about in the government and couldn't ever access yourself. Therefore, it's pretty much all on the private side for them to potentially reverse engineer things that you, the government, wouldn't even know about.
Correct.
That was kind of an issue, no?
Yeah, it was. Let's look at a real case scenario here. Let's look at the Apollo missions, okay, and the early days of the U.S. government's space race and race to the moon. It was about 10 years. It's when Kennedy said, we're going to put a person on the moon, and not because it's easy, but because it's hard, et cetera, et cetera. And that was in 1969, we successfully landed somebody on the moon. That was a 10-year endeavor. Now, we had to invent everything from scratch to do that. No one had been to really space before. No one had ever been certainly to another celestial body, and nobody knew what it was even like and how to do it and how to get there and what was involved with technologies. And so we had about 9 to 10 years to figure it out, maybe a little less. As a result of that, and think about this, 6,200 industries and products were invented and created to do that. So, for example, things like the LED light bulb, Velcro, right? The CAT scan. These are technologies in some cases that have changed humanity forever, have benefited our well-being, all because of a space race and a competition for a little less than a decade with a foreign adversary, right? These technologies have long outlived the initial purpose for which they were created, right? Imagine a company that has access to material or technology and without fair competition, able to do things and make money based upon that. Now, I'm not against capitalism at all. Capitalism works. It's fantastic as long as we all play by the same rules, right? Capitalism doesn't work when one company gets an unfair advantage over another. And therein lies part of the problem. Because if you have material that was in the possession of the government and says, okay, you can use this to analyze it for us, that doesn't mean you can just turn around and start making profit off of it and creating stuff that we don't agree for you to make. That property belongs to the American people. That belongs to the government, not you. Let's make that clear up front. You don't own that property unless we sell it to you,
yes.
right? And so therein lies part of the problem. Also, you have legal consequences. So let's, for example, say, here we go, company. Oh, that's I won't do that. There we go. We got this and we got this. Company A and Company B on the government, right? And I find something interesting in the desert, and I say, hey, Company A, I want you to go ahead and analyze that for me. Okay, Company B, don't worry about that. You just go over here and do your thing. 10 years later, what happens? Company A becomes a multi-billion-dollar aerospace company. Okay? Company B, what happens? Well, they went bankrupt. 200 jobs were lost, and the investors who had that money in there, gone, right? What just happened? Well, the U.S. government gave an unfair advantage to Company A instead of Company B.
Right.
They make the money, they make the profit. Now, there are actual rules and laws and regulations like SEC violations that if I do that and this company goes bankrupt, now there's a real legal liability on my part because I broke the law. I did something that I wasn't allowed to do. Because,
as the government?
As a government, yeah, because I gave an unfair advantage to one company over another, right? There's rules and mechanisms to do stuff. I want to give Company A material. There's rules and procedures to do that. I can't just go and give it to them. There are, unless they are a prime contractor and I have these avenues that are taken care of and blah, 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 there are laws against being able to give these unfair advantages. Because why? There is money behind it. We're in a capitalist world. People invested in Company B because they thought they were going to be a company that has the same type of potential as Company A. But we didn't know that there was an unfair relationship between a couple people in the government and Company A. So here, we're going to slide that to you, right? It's like all these sweetheart deals where you're paying $22,000 for a toilet seat for an airplane.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, what? Well, how does that happen? Well,
Inside
it happens because someone in the government has a sweetheart deal with somebody here and they get away with it, right?
So are you saying, and maybe I'm taking this a little too far, but are you saying we gave sweetheart deals to certain companies as it pertains to, say, UFO crash retrievals, and we had now created a beast that we cannot tame?
It appears that may very well be the case. That may be one of the issues that we're dealing with. And if that's the case, okay, well, there's real legal consequences. How do we fix this without, do you give them amnesty? I think you do. People are going to say, oh, you can't do that. Well, listen, do you want the truth or not? What's the cost of it? There's examples where we do this truth and reconciliation. We did it in Rwanda. We've done it with other countries where we say, look, a lot of bad things were done on both sides. We're willing to forgive all of it if we can reconcile and if we can move forward together towards the truth. And I think that's the way we do it. This is why I said we don't villainize those who are part of these efforts. I know it's easy. People want to do that and they want their pound of flesh, and I say no.
Yeah, but the company on that end, I want to stick with your example here. Company A, if they became a multi-billion-dollar whatever, the government making that mistake is not their fault. They just reap the benefit of it. So what incentive do they have to come to the table? Like, what can the government legally say to them? You allowed them to do it.
Well, this is part of the eminent domain conversation, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Which is, by the way, I'm not going to get into because it's very controversial. But look, the government has the right through eminent domain to do whatever the hell it wants. If you got something and it's better and it's in the interest of national security or national interest, we'll buy your house. We'll put a highway right through it. We'll do whatever we need to do. Make no mistake. We will absolutely do it, right? The same holds true with this. The problem is the government's been saying no for so long. It doesn't exist. They don't want it back. They're like, I don't want it. Yeah. you keep it. You figure out. I don't want nothing to do with that, So it's a double-edged sword. This is a very – it's actually a great conversation because it kind of highlights some of the complexities we're dealing with. People just say, well, I just want the truth. Well, but it's not that simple. It's not just, okay, here's the truth, because the consequences of that, how you get the truth, can make or break something. And there are people there that don't want that to happen.
Well, a huge problem with the truth that people have with anything involving the phenomenon is that, as Michio Kaku says, we have no physical evidence. Steal a pen. For God's sake, steal something. Do you believe in God?
Well, I believe in the God of Einstein. he believed in God, but not the God that intervenes in human affairs. It was the God of order, the God of simplicity and elegance. Einstein was asked the question, did the universe have a choice? Is it unique? So universes, you can create universes in an afternoon, but most of them are unstable. Most of them fall apart. Most of them don't work. Our universe is stable. It works. Everything fits together. And then the question is, what set off the bang? That's what we do for a living. We have the Big Bang Theory up to the point where the universe is going to explode. Why did it explode? We think it was a quantum event, and we are here because we are in the universe which decided to explode. So Einstein said, was it all an accident? And he thought, no, it could not have been an accident.
You know, and like I hear him because, you know, like I had Jesse, I just recorded with Jesse Michaels. That's going to be coming out 1 or 2 episodes after you. But like he talked about like the bovine that he saw and showed it with Gary Nolan that Jaque Vallee had brought to him. So like maybe there's something physical there. But like it's not like we have when David Grush came out who was able to like remove the curtains and say, here's the UFO we recovered in 1933. And it's the same thing with you. You're out here saying, I've seen the evidence written up in papers. And I think you're also saying like maybe you've seen some physical evidence too. But like, can you understand why skeptics out there are saying, well, this is religious as well if we don't have physical evidence?
Yeah, my response, well, first of all, we do have physical evidence. It's just you don't see it because it's with the government and it's being,
or with the private companies.
With the private companies, right, who work for the government, by the way, right? So
allegedly.
Yeah, or should anyways, right? And you're right. You should I'm not asking you to believe me. Your government's already told you that you've had a former director of national intelligence, Radcliffe, former director of the CIA, Brennan. You had a former president of the United States. You had a president just now a week and a half ago, a former president that said, hey, if I get elected, I'm going to release the UFO files. Because the guy asked him, would you do it? He said, yeah, I'll do it. And oh, by the way, I tried to do it before, but I got a lot of flack for doing it. I mean,
do it.
But did you hear that? What he says? He says, I tried to do it before, but I got a lot of resistance. Wait a minute. Do you know what that means? That's acknowledged. That's saying, yes, I've been briefed to it. I want to do it. But someone is telling me no. So, you know, don't believe Lue Elizondo. Don't listen to Lue Elizondo. I don't give a shit. Do what I say. Do your research, man. Don't be lazy. Get out there and be proactive. Read what's out there. Read what people are saying. People in authority who are telling you this. Not forget Lue Elizondo. You know, it's there.
Yeah,
it's there. You don't need it from me. All you need from me is maybe a little bit of my background and XYZ. But there's already data there. There's already data there. You've already had an acknowledgement by the U.S. government in many ways of the reality of this topic. You've already had these reports to Congress. They said, look, every time we go and try to figure these things out, we have more, not less, right? Government said, oh, we have complete air domain awareness over our country. What happens when we start recalibrating our radars to look for UAP? Boom, surveillance satellite from China just wafting over northern continental United States. Right. Yeah. So if you look at the data, what the data is suggesting, that is all I'm asking people to do. I'm not, and this is why I don't give my opinion. But what do you think, Lue? It doesn't matter what Lue thinks. What matters is what you think. Stop asking me that. Don't make me think for you, because that is your ability to look at information objectively is sacred. No one should be thinking for you. You should be thinking for you. And so my job is easy. Here's the facts and the data. You decide what you want to do with it. That is really what this boils down to.
Have you stood in front of a recovered UFO?
I am, I can talk about what's in the book because I got cleared for it. So let me say this. I have had in my possession material that was allegedly recovered from a UFO.
Who gave it to you?
I cannot say.
Okay.
It was, but I have been told, I was warned very, very clearly, this I'll share with you. I was told several years ago that I could never talk about crash retrievals or material, ever. And I signed a paperwork for it, right? So that in itself should be evidence for you. But more importantly than that, it's only been recently I'm allowed to talk about the one piece of material because it's in my book and it got cleared for it.
Okay, let's talk about it.
I have to honor that. So just so you understand, I'm not trying to be evasive. I don't want to go to jail. Okay?
I hear you.
So there is material that I've had access to that was clearly engineered. We had one of the very best, I can't say which one of the very best aerospace companies and government contractors. Okay, so you can try to figure out who that was.
Lockheed.
Try to replicate.
Sorry,
I'm not
I got something
saying
stuck in my
not
throat.
saying one way or the other. Tried to replicate that material, and at a cost of $1 million, and it broke the machine. They're able to create this material at a macro level, a sandwich between one piece and another piece. This material, up to 3 years ago, I don't know about now, but 3 years ago, we could not replicate. We could not. We did not have the technology to manufacture it. When you look at this material, and you found out, when we know for sure we found it and where it was found, temporally, there's a problem, because this material has obviously been engineered with a technology that at least we're pretty sure we don't have. Maybe the Russians, maybe the Chinese, sure. Back in the 1990s, 1940s, definitely not. That is equivalent to us as if you have a piece of material that says, hey, this is from 1940, whatever. And you look at it and you say, oh, wow, that's pretty interesting because we didn't have that technology. That's like going into, as I've said before, going into King Tut's tomb for the very first time as we've discovered it. And as you chisel away the plaster wall and you peek inside, you see a fully assembled 747 jet. It doesn't make sense.
Right.
They did not have the technology to do that back then. I don't care what you think, but there it is, right? So how to get in there? It's the same thing. It's the same issue we have here. If we don't even have the technology now, someone did. It came. I mean, it came from somewhere. And when you look at the atomic, so we go. There's 3 levels of analysis, and maybe it might be helpful if I explain it real quick. So, I find this. Okay.
That makes noise, by the way. If you want to do it. No, on the bottom, see the on button. Now hit it.
Okay.
What the F? You've gotta be kidding.
Okay.
Little known trick.
So imagine being Da Vinci and walking in a desert in the 1600s and finding this, right?
Yeah, it'd be trippy.
Yeah. So it's made of plastic and it talks. It's magic, right? It's magic. So my point being, it's kind of in the same way. Da Vinci would never expect something like this and would have no idea its use, right? And understand what a battery is and how this speaker works and it's magic. There's 3 types of analysis you would do. First of all, if I find this in the desert and let's say I was Da Vinci and I had the technology, first I'm going to do is I'm probably going to weigh it and I'm going to do a physical analysis. I'm going to say, okay, it's hard, it's solid, it's made of some sort of plastic material, it weighs half a kilogram. Roughly this dimension. It's not electric. It doesn't conduct electricity, but something inside does, blah, 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 blah. If that's interesting enough, that'll warrant a chemical molecular analysis. Now I want to see it. I know it's some hard solid surface, but I want to see the relationship between the molecules themselves. How are they arranged? What is the relationship with the other molecules in there? Well, I analyze this. It's got some copper in it. It's got some lithium. It's got some plastic. Polymer. It's got some aluminum in it, right? And if that's interesting enough, then I say, okay, I'm going to spend the extra money. I'm going to do a atomic analysis at the nano level. I want to see how not the molecules, but how the atoms are actually arranged, because within the natural environment, there's a variation of isotopes that we find here on this planet, and it turns out that they're natural. There are some that are not natural. And that's the reason why, speaking of King Tut's tomb, this is why it's kind of important, because for decades, there was a little dagger that we found in King Tut's tomb that we just thought was a neat little dagger. It wasn't until we did the analysis on it that we realized it wasn't from Earth. The metal came from a meteorite. And we know that. And that's when all of a sudden it became important. Like, oh my gosh, this is why they buried him with the dagger, because this is made from meteorite. It's not from Earth, right? It's magical or whatever. There's significance behind it. You know that by looking at isotopic ratios at the atomic level and how they are arranged. And when you find that atoms are arranged with such a level of precision, that takes a lot of technology. It's really, really expensive, right? And the uses for that are fairly finite, at least from our own technological perspective. There's only so many reasons you would want to invest in making something with that level of accuracy. Remember, at a cost of $1 million, we were able to put 2 pieces together. This is much, much more complicated than that. So that is why material analysis is so important. That's why when you come across a piece of material that's been engineered and then you find out when it was recovered, right? That kind of changes, you could say, yeah, maybe Russia, China has that ability now or has in the last 5 or 10 years, not decades ago. And so that is part of the compelling evidence. And now I'm not a material scientist, but we had people that looked at it, right? There's people that even to this day and age in the government are analyzing stuff. I can't say who, can't say where, but they're interested in analyzing this type of material, and it's happening. So I know I'm not scratching your itch specifically, but I'm trying to have a conversation while getting around any issues that might get me in trouble.
Right.
'Cause I can't be specific, but I'm giving you an example of how you do analysis, why it's important, and what makes a piece of material so compelling. That's what makes that material compelling.
Yeah, it always fucks with my head thinking about this because you're assuming you have some, whether it be a crazy advanced civilization or future humans, whatever it is, it's like these beings would have so much more understanding of whatever the physical world is than we do, to the point that I've always said, like, wouldn't they be able to simulate everything ahead of time? Like, wouldn't they be able to simulate a crash happening or something like that so that it wouldn't happen? I mean, you talk in your book about your conversations with Hal Puthoff, for example, on Roswell, where he's got some fascinating thoughts there, but he's like, hey, it was probably some sort of EMP interference from our universe that fucked with the craft falling to Earth, and boom, there were 2 of them, and one of them we were then able to recover, and then the government tried to cover it up and say it was a balloon. So, when you see things like that, it's like our way less advanced squirrel species is able to have some capabilities that fuck up these civilizations so much that we're able to even get evidence like that, allegedly.
Yeah. So your argument is that, we're the monkeys on the ground. It couldn't be things, if they're those so advanced, how are they allowed to be so vulnerable and susceptible, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So we are in a beautiful place here in Hoboken. And again, I'll be respectful of privacy. But I noticed this morning when I was getting up and walking outside the hotel, you had this beautiful view of the Hudson. I mean, it's just gorgeous, just beautiful, beautiful. And, it was only a few years ago that you had a what some call a miracle here. You had a commercial jet.
Yep, Sully,
and crashed. What you want to remind your audience what happened?
So it was a Tom Hanks movie later, but they took off from LaGuardia, went up into the sky as they were coming up. Sully Sullenberger, the captain, realized there were birds. The birds came into the engine. Suddenly the plane failed, and Sully used unbelievable skills that he had acquired over 40-some years or something of flying, was able to pull it back around right out here, correctly as you point out, on the Hudson in between Manhattan and Hoboken, and basically land the plane perfectly such that it didn't crash on impact and split apart, and saved everyone on the plane.
Yeah, amazing, huh? If you're a bird, wouldn't you be asking the same question? These humans are so advanced. How can a dumb bird bring down a jet full of people and almost kill every single human being? A bird.
That's a good parallel you just gave.
Don't forget to tip your bartenders and your waitresses.
So you think that some of this is just straight up a mistake, because again, but let me counter argue that. Maybe we are the separation and advancement of us to birds, which is quite large, let's be honest. Maybe it's not nearly as large as it is with these civilizations. How can we even know that? Like you talk about in your book, not knowing whether or not this is a threat, but treating it as it could be. And like maybe they're on the battlefield getting ready for battle right here, and they've just been doing it for the last, 80 years specifically or something like that, because time is, 1 second to them. What is 80 years to us? Like, you see where it gets a little convoluted and it gets beyond what we can even have a scope of intelligence.
Well,
on?
I do. And this is why I think this type of conversation is so important, because we're putting ourselves always in that box of, anthropomorphic. If there's so much advantage and I'll do the mistake. Remember, we may be dealing with something that is uniquely, potentially not human at all, right? So, it's hard. It's hard to do that because we are innately human. How do you not think like a human if that's all we do, right? So it is. I can see how it gets fuzzy. I can see how people get frustrated and they kind of go through these mental gymnastics of, okay, well, they're millions of years ahead of us. Well, maybe not. Maybe they're not 10 years, 50 years ahead of us. We have evolved more in the last 100 years technologically than we have in the last 100,000. Okay?
Yeah.
So it's a logarithmic. Yeah, it's a curve. That's right. And so is it possible that 100 years from now that we're going to have the exact same ability that they have?
Maybe.
Possible, right? They may not be million. They may just be 100 years ahead of us, or they could be from right here. They're just, like I said, little beasties. We're at the point now where we're beginning to interact with them. They've been here all along, baby. We don't know. So we have to keep, and this is why I always tell people, in my opinion, which I don't like to do very often, we should keep all options on the table until they're not on the table. And are there people out there in the government that know more? Probably.
Yeah.
And they should come out. They should be able to talk to Congress. That's what I'm trying to do, is create an environment where ultimately the conversation can be had and people have the truth, whatever that truth is. Whatever that truth looks like, give the people the opportunity to have the truth and have the conversation for themselves. And then I'm done. I'm out.
Well, you're a veteran of this game, having been in it for the last 16, 17 years, whatever it is, when you were first read in. And yet when you come into it, you're joining a guy like Hal Puthoff, who's been read in for, at that point, like 45 years.
Oh, brother, don't think that fact didn't weigh on me. Every single person there had more experience than me by a lot.
But you're also, you're there with like Michael Jordan. Like, how do you even conceive like
you don't compete with Michael Jordan. You help Michael Jordan. When you're on the team and you come into the new team and you're with Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, you don't compete with them. You support them. That's what you do.
You're Steve Kerr.
I'm not even that. I'm the guy who's in the sidelines, giving them towels. I'm the towel boy and the water boy. No, you don't. And everybody has, I think. And God, I don't want to say everybody's a tool, because people, you're a tool. But the reality is that I look at all of us as tools in a toolbox. And some of us are hammers, some of us are wrenches, some of us are screwdrivers. And you don't use a hammer to do a screwdriver's work. Yeah. And you don't use a screwdriver to do a hammer's work, right? So we all have our own skills, just like you have yours. With your audience, I could never do your job. I'd fail miserably. There are people in the government that have very specific niche capabilities. And when you can bring them all together, that's what makes a successful team. That's why you succeed. You got a great producer, you're doing what you're doing here, and you've got the right people and the right audience, and it's a team effort. It's the same thing with AATIP. It's the same thing with anything in the government, whether it's special operations or anything else. It is a team effort. It's a team that succeeds, and there is no I in team. In fact, I used to make a point when I talk to people about leadership, because everybody in government for some reason thinks they're a leader and they think rank means something.
No.
I know.
I would never believe that.
It's insane. Yeah. And I usually tell people, anybody who says that they're a leader probably isn't, because a real leader never says that they're a leader.
What's understood doesn't need to be explained.
100%. And, in government, a leader should never say the words me, mine, or I. It's always us, we, and ours, right? This is our team, and we succeed together. And it's not, this is my staff. Get the hell out of here. It ain't your staff. Government people are paying for it. Moron. You're a manager. You're not a leader. Big difference. You manage people. And by the way, there was a saying by somebody, a quote that I used to like, where they say a manager will always say go. A leader says, let's go. And I would take that even a step further. A great leader says, I'll go first. I'm through the door first. And those are the signs of leadership. And that is how you succeed, whether it's chasing UFOs or it's chasing bad guys or being a politician. We are just so used to people in these positions of authority saying, me, mine, and I,
Yeah.
And I'm the director and my staff and my administration. Well, hold on there, cowboy. It ain't your administration. It's my administration. It's our administration. We're paying for it, right? You're just doing the job we asked you to do. That ain't your administration. That's the people's administration. But we're so accustomed to it. We're so used to it that we just accept it now.
Yeah.
And I reject it, man. I think this is part of our problem. And it's not just in the Department of Defense. It's not just in the CIA or in the intelligence community. It's the whole government now, man. And we are okay with it. Why?
Yeah.
Why have we got so used to, so accustomed to that mindset that we just not only do we not do anything about it, we agree with it?
Well, yeah, and I understand what you're saying, and also like you're a humble guy, but I don't think there's from the outside, based on the story we've been given, which is what we can go off of. I don't think there's any evidence to not say you haven't had a clear leadership role, whether you like it or not, in whatever this is, the disclosure movement or something like that. I mean, you're one of the guys. This was a little hazy for me, so correct me if I'm wrong.
I don't want to
with
be a
some of these
leader
details.
in this conversation. I shouldn't be. There should be no one more important than anybody else.
But you're one of the guys that's responsible, or I think the leader that's responsible for, like, releasing the gimbal video, getting those things out.
Sure, I was one of the first guys out of the plane door, but I'm not the invasion force, brother. I'm not. This is where again, well, it shouldn't be anybody. It shouldn't be a who. That's my point to all this. There shouldn't be any one person in charge, and I think that's part of why we're succeeding now, because this has been such a grassroots movement. It has really been something amazing. This is global, man. There are people all over the world, man, that are rallying for full disclosure, and that's not because of me. I mean, they see me on a TV show or something like that, but I didn't make this happen. This is I think this is a coalescing of people. Really, if I had to really give anybody credit, it's you guys. It's your generation. My generation spent the last 70 years screwing this topic up. It's your generation that are saying, you know what, we want the truth. You know what,
we
can
got the
it.
internet.
So I think you guys, my generation has done a good job of blaming you guys. Like it's, you guys in social media. Why do you always stuck in social media and YouTube? Look, my generation invented it, right? So who's at fault here?
Right.
Ain't you, us. I think we are where we are today in this conversation because your generation has decided not to allow the stigma and taboo that my generation imposed on this conversation. And you're just having a dialogue. And that's really why we're having the conversation now.
Well, and it's also the tools that are at our disposal to be able to spread things around the internet such that when we get evidence like the 2004 Fravor videos, the FLIR video, or the 2009 gimbal video, which involves some of our carrier ships and everything, like we can at least look at something physical on the screen and say, oh, shit.
Right.
Now you saw the 2004 video for the first time in 2009, I believe, right?
Yeah, that was actually by Chad Underwood. It wasn't by Fravor. Fravor was there as an eyewitness, but the video was actually taken by another aircraft afterward by Chad Underwood.
Okay, and that one again showed the Tic Tac that was moving in ways that would match some of the 5 observables.
Correct.
What was the first time you saw that? Did you? I mean, you talk about being one of these gradual guys, like where you gradually start.
Oh, brother,
to come to truth.
I saw other videos. That's just one. I mean, there were some that were. I mean, there's one I really wish I could talk about. It was in 4K ultra high definition video. Anybody sees that video, and there's people in the intel community that have seen it, and they're just like, okay, yeah, that's a game changer. I mean, that there's no doubt what we're looking at that point. That is not ours. That's what frustrates me because those videos are there. There are people that are aware of it. A lot of people. It's kind of a bad kept secret at this point. The problem is how that video was taken, where it was taken, under the circumstances is very classified. So it probably won't ever see the light of day.
Convenient.
Yeah. No, I'll tell you, look, honestly, where it was, I mean, I looking at it, I can say, yeah, that probably shouldn't come out, as compelling as it is, because it is, there's reasons to keep there's a couple videos there, well, more than a couple that really are sensitive, because of the circumstances of the collection, that we were doing. But there's other videos that I think should come out. I think you can scrub the metadata out of it, so you don't have locational data. There's ways where you can depixelate if you need to allow something to be released. And I'm for that. As long as we don't give away sources and methods, I think we should be as open as possible. The more videos we can release, the better. And look, some of them might have prosaic explanations, which would be great, right? Okay, case closed on that one. What about these other 10? What about these other 50? What about these other 100, right? Every time Arrow comes out with a report and they try to, and good on them, at least they're being honest with that. They're like, we had 144 incidents that we couldn't figure out. And then it became 300. Then it became 600. Then it became 800, right? And the numbers keep going up. Why? Because the more we look, the more we realize, shit, they're out there, man. There's things that are going on that, yeah, that's not our technology. We know that because we had no assets in the area at the time. And if that's adversarial technology, then we got a real problem, because God forbid that this turns out to be adversarial technology. Because what would that mean? That would mean for the last 70 plus years, some foreign adversary has managed to engineer and deploy this capability over our sensitive military installations, over controlled U.S. airspace, and has done so with complete anonymity. Now, where was China back in the 1950s? In the middle of a famine.
Yeah.
Where was Russia? I mean, right. There's no way. And so this goes back to that question. What would that mean? Well, this would be the greatest intelligence failure this country has ever experienced, eclipsing that of even 9/11. Because despite the billions of dollars that we spend trying to keep a competitive technological advantage over our adversaries, has been eclipsed by again, order of magnitude, by some sort of adversary. So, that in itself is a problem. People bring it up as a counter argument. Well, what if it's for an adversary? Okay, well, if it is now, we're in big trouble. If it's from back then, we're even bigger trouble.
But there's a third door here, and I got to play devil's advocate on this. And it doesn't, by the way,
I know what you can say.
I don't think there's so many different possible sightings of UFOs and capabilities. I don't think this can explain everything, to be clear. And I think mathematically, just to put my opinion out there so people know where I stand, I think mathematically, from what we even know about the galaxy, there has to be intelligent life out there somewhere. Whether or not it's been here, we can have that debate. But I agree with you. I don't think it could be an adversary, because they would have already fucking taken us at this point. That said, just in your program in the Pentagon, you had a situation where guys like you were on such a small team that people above you and below you didn't even know it existed.
That's correct.
Okay. So who's to say that the same thing doesn't exist with, DARPA, where there's such a limited number of people who are read in on the fact that physical world that we have as our current laws of physics, we had that figured out after we paperclipped everyone in 45. You know what I mean?
Let me just say, I hope that's the case. I would love that to be the case, because then I can sleep a lot better at night.
Lue sleeps better at night. The Nazis helped us.
Well, my point being is that we have the technological advantage, right? That this would be some sort of blue force technology.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I would not be able to discuss at all what capabilities we might or might not have regarding any type of exotic technologies. Look, we got a lot of cool toys. We do.
If you even knew about it, though.
Even
That's
if whether I knew about it or not, I cannot confirm or deny anything regarding any type of blue force capability. What I can simply say is what we don't have, but I can't say what we have. I mean, let me see if I can be more explicit with this. I cannot tell you what we might have.
And again, and I'll take that a step farther for you. I'll say probably mathematically, statistically, you also, as much as you may know, there's a lot of stuff that you and anyone else on your team and on other secret teams in the government don't know about each other too.
Absolutely.
That's how it's set up.
We ran into that all the time.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But the problem is someone needs to be the belly button. That's why when 9/11 happened, remember? Because the CIA had information, FBI had information, DOD had information. Well, it's useless if you don't have somebody coordinating it.
That's right.
That's a problem. So yes, if these other organizations existed, which looks like some did, then there needed to be a single belly button, and there wasn't. And what does that mean? That means that leads to waste of money, an uncoordinated effort, which is, again, what is it? That's a dysfunction of the government. So that needs to be fixed. That's the bureaucracy I was telling you about, the issue with the bureaucracy.
And also, therefore, if the bureaucracy is set up so that everything's in cells, it makes it even more difficult to get through the various chains of commands, the need or the urgency to do certain things where you know the information and yet people above you who are assigned to make the decision don't. So I don't think there's any better example of this than what you allege in the book, which is that you had this thing called Operation Interloper where you wanted to basically set up a fucking, master honey trap involving one of your carriers out in the sea where a lot of transmedium UFOs are allegedly spotted, to basically set up this enormous nuclear situation to try to draw into the mother lode, if you will, whoever these beings are, to come to the ship, and you were going to use some sort of impetus to clap them and collect the evidence, and in the end the government, through the chain of command, they said you can't do this.
Yeah, so you're referring to the issue of compartmentalization, and you compartmentalize information because it's so sensitive. You want to risk any type of compromise to it, right? So you say, this is really, really secret. So XYZ, XYZ. The problem is if it's overly compartmentalized, the information never gets to the person it needs to get to in the first place. And I'd like to quote real quick for Interloper. You're talking about it, by the way. Jay was very helpful with that. He was really one of his masterminds. Yeah, he was one of his masterminds. Him and we put this together. But he did a good job. It's a shame it didn't get approved because it was phenomenal. He really did most of the heavy lifting on that. So I'd like to quote from my friend Chris Mellon. Chris Mellon is from the Mellon family, the famous Mellon family. So think Carnegie Mellon. Think of Mellon Bank, Mellon University, right? Gulf Oil. He's an incredible human being, though, and he was a senior staffer for Bill Cohen, Senator Bill Cohen, and then later when Bill Cohen became the Secretary of Defense, he brought him with him to the Pentagon and became one of the senior most intelligence officials in the Department of Defense. And Chris always reminds me, even when I don't want to be reminded, because he's absolutely right. He says, we didn't win the Cold War because we kept better secrets. The Russians did. We won the Cold War because we knew how to move information more efficiently than the Russians. And he's absolutely correct.
What does he mean by that?
Well, classified information, if I collect information on XYZ and you're the guy who needs that information to do something with it, I have a way to get that information to you very quickly. And if you've got a colleague over there that needs that information, maybe parts X and Z, you know then how to get that information to him very quickly, right? So we start moving information very fast to actually do something with it, actionable, right? You don't just keep a secret for the sake of keeping a secret, because if it doesn't get to who it needs to get to, then it's useless. You're wasting your time and your money. Secret information is only valuable because you can do something with it when you need to, right? And this goes kind of to the conversation I've always said about secrets. Secrets, a lot of people think are like a fine wine, where the longer you keep a cork on it, the better it gets. And I disagree. I've always told people I think secrets have a shelf life. They're perishable. They're like vegetables in the refrigerator. And the longer you leave them in the refrigerator, at some point they're going to start to rot and they're going to stink. And then you're going to have a bigger mess on your hands to clean up. And so secrets are only as good for the time that you need them and to get them to the people who need it, the information. Otherwise, you're wasting your time and your money. There's no reason to have classified information or collect intelligence if you're not going to do anything with it. So that is part of with the AATIP conversation. You need to have a single belly button. And this is why Arrow was such a pivotal moment for us for disclosure, because now the government's recognizing, yes, we need a single belly button. Now, can they do a better job? Yeah, I think we all agree they can do a lot better job, but they're getting there, I think. I think hopefully with this new director, we might start seeing some new focus. So I'm very optimistic about that.
But with something like Interloper, it was not in a place it needed to be, obviously, because you couldn't do it.
Correct. The right people in the chain of command didn't know what was going on.
And you can't talk about...
We couldn't say UFOs.
Yeah, but I'm saying for the actual planned event you were doing... Correct me if I'm wrong here. It's classified information exactly how you were going to.
I can't discuss exactly correct.
Right.
I can't discuss the methodology. I could probably go back to the Pentagon and request permission. Maybe I should.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's get them on the phone.
Yeah, well,
dial them up, Russ.
You got to go through DARPA. It's a little more complicated. It took my book almost a year to get through that process. It was like birthing an elephant. And still, then they still redacted information. Believe it or not.
Yeah, a little bit.
I tried like hell, man, to keep that. I wanted the whole thing to go through, but
it wasn't much though.
Yeah,
no
names.
You know.
Yeah. Well, no, there was a
significant. There were a couple pages.
Yeah, exactly. Which is a shame.
Did they shorten that? Meaning, like, was it way more? Like, it would black out like 15 lines, but was it really like 1,500 lines?
No, it was 15 lines. I made it exact.
Okay.
I wanted everybody to see exactly the portion they didn't want you to see. I did that on purpose. Because
right.
That's full transparency, right? I can't sit here and scream I want government transparency if I'm not going to be transparent myself.
Right.
So what you see is what you get. That book was put in, and what you see in those black lines is exactly the paragraph or the line or the names they did not want released. And I said, okay. I'm not gonna leak information.
Yeah, it wasn't in my opinion as just like a person reading. I didn't think it was like that much.
There was one there I really wish they would have left in because it would have been an eye opener. But I can't. Yeah, it was really
me like
it
that?
was God. I'm sorry,
It's
man.
not remote viewing stuff, is it?
No.
Okay.
It's a particular UAP incident that really was, it would have definitely been another gold standard, but they didn't want me talking about
All right,
it.
let's see if we can get it later. But the remote viewing thing is actually on that note interesting because you're making a big claim in there. You are also explaining within your book that you did some remote viewing yourself, like when you found out this was a thing with Project Stargate, which allegedly had been shut down and all that, with guys like Joe McMonagle. And for people out there, obviously remote viewing is the ability to be able to see things that are happening in another place at another time because you access, what is that thing called again? The PC in your brain? The
Quarate Puramen. No, but that's
Am I mixing up Gary Nolan's
Yeah,
thing?
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
That's okay.
Okay, but either way, like you're able to do some wild shit, and there's also something about a lot of the people who are able to do this have some sort of blood that ties back to Cherokee Nation.
Yeah, that was some of the analysis that was done by the medical professionals. And let me also state for the record, I never thought I was really good at remote viewing. I think remote viewing is, frankly, it's a vestigial capability. I think most human beings can do it actually quite easily. I always say, look, you're out of town, you call your significant other because you have this urge to call them, and they're like, oh my God, I was just thinking of you, right? My own personal, which I don't like to do, but my own personal belief is that it's nothing anything woo-woo. It's just based in science, probably quantum mechanics. A lot of scientists now, neurosurgeons and neuroscientists, believe that human consciousness. When I say consciousness, I don't mean like the weird, world is about to blossom. I'm talking about the cognitive ability of the human being outside of necessarily intelligence. What makes you, right? Not your body and not even your intelligence. There's something else that's uniquely you. That's what we call consciousness. That some neuroscientists are speculating it may be actually a form of quantum entanglement that occurs in the brain. And that is where that lies, that self-identity, that sentience, if you will. It's possible that if that's the case, that remote viewing is something we've always had for a very long time. Before we had the language skills that we have now and the ability to verbally communicate simultaneously in a language all around the world, we didn't have that before. We were living in tiny little villages and caves and whatnot. So when you came across another human being, there probably wasn't much of a spoken language, and there probably wasn't much ability to communicate. So you had to be able to identify if something is threatening or not. It's kind of like when two dogs walk into a room. When they first walk into a room, there's some sort of nonverbal communication that is occurring. And it's quite possible that this is nothing more than a vestigial capability left over when humans were much more basic and maybe relied upon it for survival. This was a survival mechanism. Is that friend or foe? Am I going to be eaten, or is he going to help me catch a tiger? So the problem is that, we always like to put labels on things, and I used to give a little presentation where I would kind of highlight that. I'd say, look, what is your definition of, when I say parachute, for example, and I'd show a picture of a parachute, and I'd say, what is para comes from the truncated. It's a Latin prefix meaning above or beside. And so when you say parachute, you think of a thing that shoots over your head and helps you hit the ground with hopefully a thump and not a thud. And then I say, what does the word paramedic mean to you? And then, people say, oh, it's first responders and it's a medic, that's helping you. And then I usually ask people, what about paranormal? And then people will see, you just did it right there. Right? Some people will smile, kind of look at you kind of crazy. You know why you did that? Because there's a stigma associated with the word paranormal. Now, I would submit to you the word paranormal is no different than parachute or paramedic. In fact, it just means something that is outside of our current understanding of what normal is.
Current understanding.
Current.
Right.
In fact, I would submit to you that the definition of anything in science is paranormal till it becomes normal. My cell phone 40 years ago, absolutely paranormal, right? The electromagnetic spectrum, absolutely paranormal 150 years ago. Now it's routine. Right. So we have created these artificial barriers in our understanding of what could just frankly just be advanced science. But because we don't understand it, we stigmatize it with terms like paranormal, right? And then we think of tinfoil hats and Ghostbusters and things like that, when in reality, it may not be. It may just be new science. And so we have to kind of limit that. When you talk about remote viewing, people kind of put that into the paranormal category. I don't think it's paranormal at all. I think it's probably just some sort of quantum process in the brain.
Yeah, I actually think your explanation here, this is one place where it was way better than in the book. Because in the book, I think maybe it's just how it gets written on the page sometimes. It made it seem like you had this superpower or something in some ways. And I think that's where people have criticized you.
Yeah,
and that's
no,
not
I don't
what you're
think so.
saying.
Not at all. No, I think it's probably rudimentary. I think most everybody has it to some degree. And I wasn't even particularly good at it. So I think once you understand how it works, and
were you able to recover? I forget. Were you able to recover like some sort of data? Wasn't there something involving like a terrorist that you were able to remote view into?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we got some guys. There was an ambush that was set up. I had some. We'll get into it, but there's some people, colleagues of mine, that were there for and witnessed it.
How did you see that?
That's a whole other conversation. We could sit here for 2 hours and talk about. There's other people that are way more qualified, like Joe McMoneagle and some of these, Ingo Swann and some other folks that are. Who you should have is probably Hal Puthoff, because he was the godfather of the remote viewing program.
I will be very excited.
He's the guy to have. He is the godfather of it. He actually
I'll drive him here myself.
Created it for the CIA, and then later on, when it was called Grill Flame and some other names before that, before it became Stargate. I would often ask him later on in my career. He would ask me. I would tell him things that we would do, and ask him to tell you about the DC Metro incident.
Okay.
I'll let him tell you that. Say, hey, Hal, Lue told me to ask you about when he told you about the 90 days and the DC Metro issue, and then see if he remembers that. Yeah.
Now, Lue, I'd say I have one more question for you, but that's a lie. But I only have one more question for you strictly because I have to get you the hell out of here in a couple.
Okay. I'm a Gemini. I like long walks on the beach and pina coladas. That's what you're going to ask, isn't it?
No. But I want to, if we can, I'll talk to you off camera afterwards. I want to get you back here in November because there's a lot, including that last topic right there, that we got to go deeper into. And, of course, I'd love to talk with Hal Puthoff. That'd be incredible. But, you talk about still being religious yourself and being the word you use in your book is spiritual. And now you've had access to so many things that relate directly to the meaning of life. So through it all, do you, as it currently stands, do you believe in God?
Absolutely. I think knowledge reinforces. It might religion. It might modify a little bit of our interpretation. Look, information doesn't threaten God. All it does is threaten our understanding of God. And there's a difference, right? There's a big difference here. It's like when the church with Galileo, you're going to be, so the fact that you're saying that the earth is not the center of the solar system, you're going to be going against religion. No, actually what you're doing is you're reinforcing the notion of the preeminence of something bigger and greater, and that the universe is much more complex than we could ever possibly comprehend. And that's been my experience. This hasn't threatened my spirituality at all. In fact, it's reinforced it significantly.
Wow.
Yep.
All right, we're going to have to dig into that next time. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate the fact that, you have answered a lot of tough questions today as well.
Nope, my honor and privilege.
I'm still going to keep some of my skepticism, but there's other things that I think you have really good arguments
for.
Hey,
healthy skepticism is important. I'm not asking you not to be skeptical about things. I'm asking you not to be a skeptic. There's a big difference. Healthy skepticism is important because it takes all sides to have the conversation.
Agreed.
And I think the fact that we can do this here in a civil way, respectful of each other, is proof that, some of the folks in the community can do the same thing, and stop throwing arrows at each other and being petty. Let's work together, right, as much as we possibly can. Let's focus on the 80% of the stuff that we agree on and maybe table the 20% that we don't.
Fair enough. Well, Lue, thank you so much.
My honor and privilege, brother.
I'll see you again soon. Congratulations on the book and all the success. Well deserved. Everybody else, you know what it is. Give it a thought. Get back to me. Peace, and please subscribe. Thank you guys for watching the episode. Before you leave, please be sure to hit that subscribe button and smash that like button on the video. It's a huge help. And also, if you're over on Instagram, be sure to follow the show at Julian Dorey Podcast, or also on my personal page at Julian D. Dorey. Both links are in the description below. Finally, if you'd like to catch up on our latest episodes, use the Julian Dorey Podcast playlist link in the description below. Thank you.